Worthless, my son sneered, tossing the yellowed cream-colored paper into the trash can like it was a used tissue. This belongs in a landfill just like the rest of her junk. I did not say a word. I just stood there in the corner of my own living room watching him and his wife desecrate the memory of the woman I loved. I waited for them to leave. I waited until the sound of their rented luxury car faded down the street before I reached into the garbage. I smoothed out the crumpled paper, my hands shaking with a mixture of grief and rage. It looked like nothing, just an old certificate with a faded seal, but I took it to the bank anyway. I expected the manager to tell me it was expired. I expected a few $100s, maybe enough to pay for a better headstone. Instead, Mr. O'Malley looked at the serial number and his face went ghost white. He did not smile. He did not offer condolences. He reached under his desk and hit a silent button. The heavy steel doors of the bank lobby slid shut with a mechanical hiss, and red lights began to flash. "Mr. Booker," he whispered, his voice trembling, "don't leave. I have to call the authorities." That was the moment I realized my quiet life was over and the war for my wife's legacy had just begun. My name is Booker. I am 69 years old, a retired mechanic with grease permanently stained into my knuckles and a heart that feels like it stopped beating 3 days ago when my wife Etta took her last breath. I thought burying the woman I loved for 40 years would be the hardest thing I ever had to do. I was wrong. The hardest part was watching my own flesh and blood stand over her grave, checking his watch. It was raining that morning, a cold gray drizzle that soaked through my black suit. It was the only suit I owned, the one I bought for our 25th anniversary. My son Tyrell stood under a large black umbrella, holding it only over himself and his wife Mackenzie. I stood in the rain, watching the casket lower into the wet Georgia clay. Tyrell did not cry, he did not throw a flower. He was tapping away on his phone, probably closing a real estate deal or telling his creditors he would have money soon. Mackenzie, my daughter-in-law, shivered in her designer coat and whispered something loud enough for me to hear. She said, "This is taking forever, and look at this mud, it is going to ruin my heels." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them to leave, to let me say goodbye to Etta in peace, but I said nothing. I have learned over the years that silence is a poor man's shield. Etta always told me, "Booker, you let that boy walk all over you." But he was our only son. We adopted him when he was a baby, gave him everything we never had. We starved so he could eat. We walked so he could ride. And this was our reward. When we got back to the house, the silence was broken by the sound of cork popping. I walked into the kitchen, shaking the rain off my coat, and saw Tyrell pouring 2 glasses of wine. My stomach turned. It was a bottle of 1982 Cabernet Etta had kept on the top shelf for decades. We were saving it for our 50th anniversary. Tyrell took a sip, swished it around his mouth, and made a face. "This tastes cheap," he grumbled, setting the glass down on Etta's pristine lace tablecloth without a coaster. "You would think after 40 years they would have bought something decent, but I guess you can't buy taste on a mechanic's pension." Mackenzie laughed, a sharp, cruel sound that grated on my nerves. She was wandering around the living room, picking up Etta's porcelain figurines and putting them back down with a sneer. "This place smells like old people and mothballs," she said, wrinkling her nose. "We are going to have to gut it, Tyrell. Rip out these carpets, knock down that wall. Open concept is the only way this place sells." Sells. The word hung in the air like smoke. Etta was not even cold in the ground yet, and they were already planning to sell the home we built with our own hands. I sat down in my armchair, the leather worn smooth by years of use, and watched them. They moved like vultures circling a carcass. Tyrell opened the drawers of the sideboard, searching. He was looking for cash, for jewelry, for anything he could pawn. "Where did Mom keep the good stuff, Dad?" Tyrell asked, not even looking at me. "I know she had some silver. I remember seeing it when I was a kid." "We sold the silver to pay for your first year of college, Tyrell," I said quietly. He scoffed. "Right. Always the martyr. Well, there has to be something here. She was a hoarder, Dad. Look at all this paper." He pulled out a shoebox from the bottom drawer. It was Etta's memory box. Inside were letters I had written her from when I was working the night shift, tickets from the first movie we saw together, and photos of Tyrell when he was a boy before he became a stranger. Tyrell dumped the contents onto the table. He pushed aside the love letters with disgust. "Junk, junk, junk," he muttered, tossing things onto the floor. Then he paused. At the bottom of the box was a thick envelope. It was yellow with age, sealed with wax that had cracked over time. He ripped it open. I leaned forward slightly. I had never seen that envelope before. Etta handled the finances. She was the one who stretched $1 until it screamed. I just fixed the cars and brought the paycheck home. Tyrell pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was cream-colored, thick, and textured like linen. It had an intricate border of green ink and a gold seal at the bottom. It looked official but ancient. "What is this?" Tyrell squinted at the script. "Omnicorp, bearer share certificate, 1980. He let out a loud barking laugh. "Oh my God, Mackenzie, look at this. Mom bought stocks." "In 1980. Mackenzie looked over his shoulder and giggled. "Omnicorp. Never heard of it. Probably some typewriter company that went bust before I was born." Tyrell shook his head, looking at me with pity that felt more like contempt. She really thought she was doing something, didn't she? Saving this piece of paper like it was treasure. This is what happens when uneducated people try to invest. They buy magic beans. He crushed the paper in his fist. The sound of the stiff paper crinkling echoed in the silent room. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice raspy. "Cleaning up, Dad," Tyrell said. He walked over to the kitchen trash can and threw the ball of paper inside. "This belongs in a landfill. Just like the rest of her junk. We need to clear this clutter if we want to get a good appraisal." He turned back to the drawers, searching for something, anything that glittered. I sat there for another hour listening to them criticize the wallpaper, the furniture, the life Etta and I had built. Finally, they got bored. "We are going to head to the hotel," Tyrell said, checking his phone. "We will be back tomorrow with a dumpster. Be ready to move your stuff, Dad. We need the master bedroom. You can take the basement. It is cooler down there anyway." They left without a hug, without a goodbye. Just the slam of the front door. As soon as the engine of their car faded, I pushed myself up from the chair. My knees popped and my back ached, but I moved with a purpose I had not felt in years. I walked to the trash can. I reached in past the coffee grounds and the empty wine bottle and retrieved the paper. I sat at the kitchen table and carefully smoothed it out. Omnicorp, 1,000 shares, preferred stock. There was a serial number in the corner and a signature at the bottom. I did not know what it meant. I am a man who works with wrenches and oil, not stocks and bonds. But I knew Etta. She never kept anything without a reason. She saved rubber bands. She saved glass jars. If she kept this paper in a sealed envelope for 40 years, it meant something. I put on my coat and my hat. It was late, almost 4 in the afternoon, but I knew the bank in town stayed open until 5 on Fridays. I walked out to my old pickup truck, the one Tyrell called a rust bucket. It started with a reliable roar. The drive to the bank was a blur of rain and tears. I kept seeing Tyrell's face as he threw the paper away. Worthless. He had called it worthless. He had called my wife's judgment worthless. I walked into the bank lobby. It was quiet, just the hum of the air conditioning and the soft typing of the tellers. I felt out of place in my work boots and my rain-soaked coat. I asked to see Mr. O'Malley. He had been the manager there for 20 years. He knew Etta. He was the one who helped us refinance the house when Tyrell needed bail money 10 years ago. Mr. Booker. Mr. O'Malley said, coming out of his glass office. He looked tired, too. "I heard about Etta. I am so terribly sorry. She was a fine woman." "Thank you," I said, taking off my hat. "I need you to look at something." I placed the wrinkled cream-colored paper on his desk. He put on his reading glasses and leaned in. At first he looked confused. He traced the gold seal with his finger. Then he stopped. He blinked once, twice. He pulled a heavy book from his shelf, a reference guide of some sort, and flipped through the pages frantically. He looked back at the paper, then at the computer screen, then at me. His face drained of all color. His hands, which were resting on the desk, began to tremble. "Mr. O'Malley," I asked, feeling a knot of fear tighten in my stomach. "Is it worthless?" Tyrell threw it in the trash. O'Malley did not answer. He slowly reached under the lip of his desk. I heard a soft click. Suddenly the atmosphere in the bank changed. The security guard by the door straightened up and put his hand on his holster. The heavy metal shutters on the windows began to lower with a mechanical hum. Red lights started flashing silently on the wall. I stood up, my heart hammering against my ribs. What is happening? Did I do something wrong? Is it a fake? Am I under arrest? Mr. O'Malley stood up and walked around the desk. He looked at me with an expression I could not read. It was fear, but it was also awe. "Mr. Booker, please sit down," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Do not leave. Do not try to exit the building. I have triggered the silent alarm. The police and the federal agents are on their way." Why, I stammered, backing away. "I didn't steal it. It was my wife's. I know, O'Malley said, raising his hands. I know it was hers. I am not calling them to arrest you, Mr. Booker. I am calling them because I cannot let you walk out of here with this paper unprotected. You have no idea what you are holding, do you? I shook my head. This paper, O'Malley said, pointing at the wrinkled document, is a bearer bond certificate from the original founding round of a tech conglomerate that is now the backbone of the modern internet. It hasn't been worthless since 1982. He took a deep breath. Mr. Booker, based on the splits and the dividends accumulated over 40 years, this piece of paper that your son threw in the garbage is worth approximately $12 million. The room spun. I grabbed the edge of the desk to keep from falling. $12 million. But that is not why I hit the alarm. O'Malley continued, his voice dropping to a terrified whisper. I hit the alarm because when I scanned this serial number just now, the system flagged a red alert. Someone tried to access this account digitally 3 days ago. They tried to claim these funds using a forged signature. He looked me dead in the eye. The IP address was traced to a luxury hotel downtown. Someone is trying to steal this from you, Mr. Booker, and they are desperate enough to commit federal fraud. You are in danger. I sank into the chair. A luxury hotel. Tyrell. My son had not just thrown the paper away because he thought it was trash. He had thrown it away because he thought he had already stolen the value from it, and he wanted the evidence destroyed. He was not just ungrateful. He was a thief, and he was coming for me. The silence in the bank was heavier than the humid Georgia air outside. The red emergency lights pulsed against the marble walls like a slow heartbeat warning of a stroke. I sat frozen in the leather chair, clutching the armrest so hard my knuckles turned the color of ash. I saw blue lights flashing through the frosted glass of the front doors. Police. 2 cruisers screeched to a halt right on the sidewalk. I expected them to burst in with guns drawn. I expected them to drag me out in handcuffs for trying to cash a fraudulent check or for being a black man in a high-security bank vault with a piece of paper worth more than my entire neighborhood. I closed my eyes and thought of Etta. I am coming to join you sooner than I thought, old girl, I whispered to myself. But the officers did not tackle me. They did not even raise their voices. They walked in briskly, their hands resting on their belts, and nodded at Mr. O'Malley. The manager stood up and gestured to me, not as a suspect, but as a man carrying a nuclear football. Officers, secure the perimeter. O'Malley said, his voice tight with professional panic. Mr. Booker is in possession of a high-value bearer instrument, and we have reason to believe there is an active threat against his assets. One of the officers, a tall man with a buzz cut, stood directly behind my chair facing the door. The other locked the main entrance. I looked at O'Malley. I felt like a child who had wandered into a movie theater halfway through the film. Mr. O'Malley, I said, my voice trembling, please explain this to me like I am 5 years old. Tyrell threw this in the trash. He said it was junk. How can junk be worth $12 million? O'Malley sat down and took a sip of water. His hands were still shaking. He picked up the cream-colored paper with a pair of tweezers he had pulled from a drawer. Mr. Booker, do you know where Etta worked in 1980? I nodded slowly. Of course I knew. She worked nights. She cleaned offices downtown. She scrubbed floors and emptied trash cans at the Omnicorp headquarters before they moved to Silicon Valley. She used to come home smelling of ammonia and lemon polish. O'Malley nodded. Omnicorp was a startup then. They had cash flow problems. Sometimes instead of paying their vendors or contractors in cash, they offered equity. Stock options. Most people took the cash because they needed to eat. Etta apparently took the stock. This certificate represents 1,000 original preferred shares. Over the last 40 years, the company split its stock 7 times. He did some quick math on a notepad. That 1,000 shares is now 128,000 shares. And they pay dividends. All those years, Etta never cashed the dividend checks. She must have had them reinvested automatically or held in a dormant account she never touched. This paper is the master key. Whoever holds this paper owns the fortune. It is called a bearer's share. It is like cash. If you lose it, the person who finds it owns the money. That is why your son throwing it away is not just stupid, Mr. Booker. It is tragic. I looked at the paper. I saw Etta's calloused hands scrubbing tile floors. I saw her coming home at 4 a.m, her back aching just so she could buy a piece of the future. She did not buy it for herself. She bought it for us, for Tyrell, and he had tossed it into the garbage with coffee grounds and eggshells. But that is not the worst part, O'Malley said, lowering his voice. He turned his computer monitor so I could see it. The screen showed a log of access attempts, rows of red text. Last week someone tried to access this dormant account online, O'Malley said. They had Eda's social security number. They had her maiden name. They even had a digital scan of her signature. It was a good forgery, but it was a forgery. My stomach dropped. Tyrell. He tried to transfer the ownership to a holding company in the Cayman Islands, O'Malley continued, but he failed. Do you know why? Because to verify a bearer share transfer, you need the physical security code printed on the bottom of the certificate, the code that is on that paper you pulled out of the trash. He tapped the screen. When the system rejected his transfer, he must have assumed the account was empty or that the certificate was invalid. He thought the paper was useless because he could not make it work digitally. He did not realize the paper itself was the money. O'Malley clicked a button, and a grainy black and white video popped up. It was footage from an ATM camera near the luxury hotel downtown. It showed a man in a sharp suit pacing back and forth on a cell phone looking furious. "Is this your son?" O'Malley asked. I looked at the man on the screen. It was Tyrell. He looked angry. He looked desperate. He looked like a stranger. "Yes," I whispered. "That is Tyrell," Mr. Booker, O'Malley said, leaning forward. "This is a felony, fraud, identity theft, attempted grand larceny. I have the police here. We can file a report right now. We can have him arrested within the hour." I stared at the screen. I saw my son, the boy I taught to ride a bike, the boy I sat up with when he had fevers. I saw the man who threw his mother's legacy in the trash. Part of me wanted to see him in handcuffs. Part of me wanted to see him pay for the disrespect. But another part of me, the part that was still a father, hesitated. If I arrested him now, he would just claim it was a misunderstanding. He would say he was trying to help manage the estate. He was slippery. I needed to know how deep this rot went. I needed to know if he was doing this alone or if Mackenzie was the one pulling the strings. "No," I said, standing up. My knees felt weak, but my mind was clearing. "Not yet. Do not arrest him yet." O'Malley looked surprised. "Mr. Booker, he is dangerous." "He is stupid," I corrected. "He thinks he threw the money away. He thinks I am a broke old man living in a house he is about to sell. If he knows I have this money, he will come for me with a knife instead of a pen." I looked O'Malley in the eye. "Freeze the account. Put this certificate in your deepest vault. Do not let anyone touch it. Not even me unless I come here with my lawyer, Mr. Harrison. If Tyrell tries to access it again, stall him. Tell him it is a system error." O'Malley nodded slowly. "I can do that." "But what are you going to do?" "I am going home," I said, putting on my hat. "I am going to play the part he wrote for me. I am going to be the confused, grieving old man. I want to see what he does when he thinks nobody is watching." The police officers escorted me to my truck. They offered to drive me, but I refused. I needed the drive. I needed to think. I drove through the streets of Atlanta, watching the neighborhoods change from the fancy glass towers downtown to the quiet, tree-lined streets of my community. Eda and I bought our house 30 years ago. It was a brick ranch, solid and unpretentious, just like us. We paid it off 10 years ago. It was supposed to be our sanctuary. When I pulled into the driveway, the rain had stopped, but the sky was still the color of a bruised plum. I turned off the engine and sat there for a moment, gathering my strength. I reached for my house key on the ring, the brass key Eda had given me on our first night in the house. I walked up the front steps. The porch light was off, even though it was getting dark. I slid the key into the lock. It went in, but it would not turn. I jiggled it. I pulled it out and tried again. Nothing. It felt like the wrong key. I stepped back and looked at the door. The hardware was new, shiny brushed nickel instead of the old brass knob I had polished for years. A keypad with numbers sat above the handle. My heart hammered against my ribs. I rang the doorbell. I heard footsteps, heavy and impatient. The door swung open. Tyrell stood there. He was wearing a silk robe and holding a glass of my whiskey. He looked at me like I was a door-to-door salesman interrupting his dinner. "Dad," he said, sighing, "you have been gone for hours. We thought you wandered off and got lost. Mackenzie was about to call the hospitals." "My key," I said, holding it up. "It does not work." Tyrell took a sip of the whiskey. "Oh, yeah. We had a locksmith come out while you were gone. Security upgrade. You know how dangerous this neighborhood is getting. Can never be too careful." He did not step aside to let me in. He just stood there blocking the entrance to my own home. "You changed the locks," I said, my voice low, without telling me. "It is for your own good, Dad," he said dismissively. "Anyway, come on in. We need to talk about the living arrangements." I stepped inside. The house smelled different. It smelled of Mackenzie's expensive perfume and something else, takeout food. Greasy pizza boxes were stacked on Etta's lace tablecloth. Mackenzie was sitting on my sofa with her feet up on the coffee table. She was wearing her shoes inside the house. Etta never allowed shoes in the house. "Oh, good you are back," she said without looking up from her phone. "We ordered pizza. There is a slice left if you want it. It is cold, though." Tyrell closed the door behind me and locked the new deadbolt with a loud click. It sounded like a cell door closing. "Okay, Dad, here is the situation," Tyrell said, clapping his hands together. "Mackenzie and I talked it over. Since we are going to be managing the sale of the house and handling all the estate business, it makes sense for us to stay here. We need to be on site to oversee the renovations." I looked at him. "You are staying here. In my house." "Our house, Dad," he corrected me, his eyes cold. "Technically, since Mom died without a will, half of this place is mine anyway. And since you are clearly overwhelmed, we are stepping up." He pointed down the hallway toward the master bedroom. We moved our bags into the master suite. It has the best light, and Mackenzie needs the ensuite bathroom. I felt the blood drain from my face. That was Etta's room. Her scent was still on the pillows. Her clothes were still in the closet. "You are sleeping in my bed," I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "It is just a bed," Booker Mackenzie said, rolling her eyes. "Don't be so dramatic. We put fresh sheets on it. We threw out those old quilts. They were dusty. They threw out the quilts Etta made by hand." "So where do I sleep?" I asked, looking at my son. Tyrell pointed to the door that led to the finished basement. "We set up a cot for you downstairs," he said. "It is quiet down there. You will have your privacy. Plus it is closer to the laundry room so you can help out with the washing. We are going to be generating a lot of laundry while we work." The basement. It was damp down there. It had one small window that looked out at the dirt. It was where I kept my tools and the old boxes. It was not a bedroom. It was storage. "You want me to live in the basement?" I said. "Like a dog." Tyrell laughed, a short, humorless sound. "Wow, Dad. A dog. Really? We are letting you stay in your own house while we do all the work to sell it and make you rich, and you are complaining. This is why we need to take over. You are not thinking clearly. You are ungrateful." Mackenzie stood up and stretched. "I am tired, Tyrell. Let's go to bed. Tell him to keep the noise down. I have a headache." She walked past me without a glance and went into my bedroom, closing the door. Tyrell looked at me. "Go on, Dad. Get some rest. We have a big day tomorrow. We are going to start clearing out the rest of Mom's junk. We need this place empty by Monday." He turned off the living room lights, leaving me standing in the dark. I walked to the basement door. I opened it and the smell of mildew and cold air hit me. I walked down the wooden steps, my knees aching with every movement. I found the cot they had set up. It was an old camping cot with a thin blanket. I sat down on the edge of it. I could hear them walking around upstairs. I heard the floorboards creak above my head, the same floorboards I had nailed down 20 years ago. I heard them laughing. They thought they had won. They thought they had taken my castle and thrown me in the dungeon. They thought I was a powerless old man who would just fade away into the dark. I reached into the inside pocket of my coat and touched the copy of the receipt Mr. O'Malley had given me. I thought about the $12 million sitting in the vault. I thought about the security footage of Tyrell trying to rob his own mother. I laid down on the cot and stared at the exposed beams of the ceiling. I did not sleep. I listened, and I planned. They wanted me in the basement. Fine, I would be in the basement. But they forgot one thing. The foundation of the house is in the basement, and if you know where to look, you can bring the whole structure down. The air in the basement tasted like copper and old earth. It was a thick, damp smell that settled into my clothes and made my joints ache with a dull, throbbing pain. They had moved my cot into the corner away from the single small window that looked out onto the backyard at ground level. This was my home now. A concrete box beneath the floorboards of the life I had built. I sat on the edge of the cot, wrapped in a thin wool blanket, listening to the sounds of my house being invaded from above. The heavy thud of boots, the screech of furniture being dragged across hardwood, the high-pitched laughter of my daughter-in-law Mackenzie. It was raining again. A relentless Georgia downpour that turned the red clay of the backyard into a slick mud. I watched the rain streak against the dirty glass of the basement window. Suddenly a shadow crossed the light. The back door upstairs swung open. I saw Mackenzie's legs, clad in expensive boots, step onto the back porch. She was holding a black trash bag. She did not walk to the garbage cans at the side of the house. She walked to the edge of the porch and simply upended the bag into the yard. I watched in horror as my wife's life tumbled out into the mud. Old photo albums, her collection of porcelain angels, the knitted afghan she had spent a winter making. And then I saw him, Mr. Bear. It was a raggedy brown teddy bear with one button eye missing. Etta had kept that bear for 40 years. It was the first gift I ever bought her when we were dating. I had won it at a county fair throwing baseballs at milk bottles. She had loved that bear. Even when the fur wore off and the stuffing started to come out, she kept it on her nightstand. She said it reminded her that we started with nothing and built something real. Now Mr. Bear was lying face down in the mud, the rain soaking into his old cotton fur. Mackenzie dusted her hands off as if she had just touched something filthy. She laughed, a cold sound that vibrated through the glass, and went back inside, slamming the door. I waited. I sat in the dark, counting the seconds. I had to wait until the lights upstairs went out, or at least until they moved to the front of the house. If they saw me rescuing the trash, they would just throw it away again or burn it. I had to be invisible. An hour later, the house went quiet. I pushed open the basement door that led directly to the yard. The hinges screamed in protest, and I froze, praying they did not hear. Nothing, just the rain. I stepped out into the storm. The cold rain hit me like a slap. I scrambled over the wet grass, my knees sinking into the mud. I gathered the photo albums first, trying to shield them with my body. Then I crawled to the bear. I picked him up. He was heavy with water and coated in red clay. I held him to my chest, feeling the water seep through my shirt. I felt like I was holding Etta. I felt like I was saving her all over again. I dragged everything back into the basement. I hid the albums inside an old tire I kept in the corner. I took Mr. Bear and hid him deep inside a box of rusty engine parts, covering him with an oily rag. They would never look there. Mackenzie would rather die than touch grease. I sat shivering in the dark, listening to the rain, and promised Etta that I would make them pay for every drop of rain that touched her things. The next evening, the door at the top of the stairs opened. Dinner time, Booker Mackenzie called out. Her voice was too bright, too loud, like she was talking to a naughty child. I walked up the stairs slowly, exaggerating my limp. I had to make them believe I was weak. I had to make them believe I was breaking. The kitchen was unrecognizable. Etta's warm yellow curtains were gone, replaced by stark white blinds. The table was set for 3, but my place was set with a plastic bowl and a plastic spoon. "Sit down, Dad," Tyrell said, without looking up from his phone. I sat. Mackenzie placed a steaming bowl in front of me. It was a thick gray sludge that smelled of heavy cream and artificial mushrooms. "Cream of mushroom soup," she said, smiling. "I made it special. It is soft, so you do not have to chew. I know your teeth are getting bad." My teeth were fine. I had every single one of them. But more importantly, I was severely lactose intolerant. Milk and cream made me violently ill. Stomach cramps that felt like knives, nausea that lasted for days. Mackenzie knew this. Etta had made sure everyone knew it. For years at family dinners, Mackenzie had rolled her eyes when Etta made dairy-free versions of casseroles just for me. "This looks delicious, Mackenzie," I said, my voice trembling just enough. "But you know I cannot eat cream. It makes me sick." "Oh, stop it, Booker," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "It is just a little bit of milk. It is good for your bones. You need the calcium. Besides, I pureed it so it is easy on your stomach. Eat it. We cannot afford to waste food." Tyrell finally looked up. "Just eat the soup, Dad." Mackenzie spent all day cooking. Don't be ungrateful. Ungrateful. I looked at the bowl. This was not a meal. It was a test. It was a punishment. If I ate it, I would be sick and weak for days, unable to fight back. If I refused, they would starve me. I picked up the plastic spoon. I dipped it into the gray mixture. I brought it to my lips. The smell made my stomach turn. I pretended to take a sip, but I let the liquid flow back into the bowl while making a swallowing motion. I mumbled. "Very creamy." "Good," Mackenzie said, returning to her own plate of steak and potatoes. "See? Was that so hard?" I spent the next 20 minutes pretending to eat, stirring the soup around to make it look like the level was going down. When they were distracted, arguing about the cost of granite countertops, I poured half the bowl into the potted plant in the corner. "I am full," I said, pushing the bowl away. thank you. I went back down to the basement, my stomach empty and growling. But I was prepared. Being a mechanic means you always have a backup plan. Behind a stack of old tires in the far corner of the basement, I had a stash, canned peaches, a jar of peanut butter, a box of crackers, things I had bought and hidden months ago just in case of a storm. I sat in the dark eating cold peaches from the can with my fingers. The syrup was sweet and sticky. It tasted like victory. They could take my bed, they could take my house, but they could not break me. I was a survivor. And survivors know how to wait. But waiting was dangerous. I needed to know what they were planning. I needed ears in the enemy camp. My eyes fell on a box of old electronics I had meant to repair years ago. Inside was a baby monitor. We had bought it for Tyrell 35 years ago. It was old analog technology, clunky and yellowed plastic. But simple technology is often the hardest to detect. I spent the next hour working in the dim light of a flashlight. I cleaned the battery contacts. I rewired the receiver. I tested it. A faint static hiss came through. It was alive. Now I just needed to plant it. I waited until I heard the shower running upstairs. That meant one of them was occupied. I crept up the stairs. The kitchen was empty. I moved silently to the living room. Under the main sofa there was a vent that connected directly to the central heating system. The metal grate was loose. I slid the transmitter unit inside the duct, deep enough that it could not be seen, but close enough to pick up voices in the living room and the kitchen. I hurried back down to the basement and turned on the receiver. The sound was tinny but clear. I heard the splash of water. I heard the hum of the refrigerator. I had ears. I lay on my cot, the receiver pressed to my ear like a lifeline. I waited. Midnight passed, then 1 o'clock. The house was silent. I was starting to drift off when a noise jerked me awake. Footsteps, pacing, back and forth directly above my head. It was the heavy tread of my son. Then a voice, low, urgent, and terrified. "Please, man, you have to give me more time." I pressed the receiver harder against my ear. Tyrell was on the phone. I know, I promised you the money this week," Tyrell whispered. "But there is a complication. The house, it is complicated." Silence. He was listening to someone on the other end. No, he is not dead," Tyrell said, his voice cracking. "That is the problem. The old man is still breathing, and his name is on the deed. I cannot sell it until I get power of attorney, or until he, my blood ran cold. Or until he, my son was talking about my death as a logistical hurdle." "Look, I am handling it," Tyrell hissed. "We are working on it. We are going to get him declared incompetent. Once I have the signature, I can liquidate the assets. The house is worth $500,000 easy. That covers everything I owe you plus interest." Another pause. "Please don't come here," Tyrell begged. "Don't hurt her. Mackenzie has nothing to do with this. Just give me a few more days. I swear I will fix it. I will get the house. Just don't hurt me." The call ended. I heard Tyrell drop into a chair. I heard him weeping softly. I stared up at the wooden beams. $500,000. My son owed $500,000 to people who threatened violence. That was why he was here. That was why he threw away the bearer bond. He was desperate. He was cornered. A cornered animal is the most dangerous thing in the world. He needed the house, and I was the only thing standing in his way. He wasn't just waiting for me to die. He was actively looking for a way to accelerate the process. I turned off the monitor. The silence of the basement was suddenly deafening. I was not safe here. Not anymore. They would not stop at soup. They would not stop at the basement. I had to move. I had to strike first. But I was just an old man in a basement with a can of peaches and a teddy bear. I needed help. I needed a weapon. And I remembered the note I had hidden in my shoe. Mr. O'Malley's card. And the name of a lawyer he had scribbled on the back. Harrison. Tomorrow I would find a way to make a call. Tomorrow the old mechanic was going to start dismantling his son's life, bolt by bolt. The smell of bacon woke me up. It was a rich, salty aroma that drifted down the basement stairs and taunted my empty stomach. For a moment, I forgot where I was. I forgot the damp cot and the cold concrete floor. I thought Etta was upstairs cooking our Sunday breakfast just like she had for 40 years. Then I opened my eyes and saw the exposed pipes above my head, and the reality crashed back down on me. Etta was gone. I was a prisoner in my own home, and the man cooking bacon upstairs was the same man who was plotting to sell the roof over my head to pay off a gambling debt. I sat up and rubbed my aching knees. The can of peaches I had eaten the night before felt like a stone in my gut. I needed to be sharp today. I needed to be the fox, not the hound. I checked the baby monitor receiver hidden under the cot. It was silent. They were probably in the kitchen. I walked up the stairs, slowly counting each step. 1, 2, 3. I had to play the part. I had to be the frail old man they thought I was. I opened the door to the kitchen, and the brightness of the morning sun blinded me for a second. Tyrell was standing by the stove, flipping bacon with a metal pair of tongs. He was dressed in a polo shirt and khakis, looking like he was about to head to a country club instead of a meeting with a loan shark. Mackenzie was sitting at the table, sipping coffee and scrolling on her tablet. She did not look up when I entered. "Good morning, Dad," Tyrell said, turning around with a smile so bright it looked painful. "You slept late. We were getting worried about you." I looked at the table. There was a plate set for me. Eggs, toast, bacon. Real food. It was a stark difference from the gray soup of the night before. This was the carrot before the stick. "I slept fine," I lied, dragging my feet as I walked to the chair. "The basement is quiet." "Sit down," Tyrell said, pulling out the chair for me. "Eat up. You need your strength. We have a big day today." I sat down and looked at the food. I waited for them to stop watching me, but they just stared. They wanted to see me eat. They wanted to see me grateful. I picked up a piece of bacon and took a bite. It was cold and greasy, but it was protein. I ate it slowly, chewing each bite thoroughly while my mind raced. Why the sudden kindness? Why the breakfast? Then I saw it. Next to the salt shaker was a thick manila folder. It sat there innocent and heavy, waiting for the right moment to be opened. Tyrell poured me a cup of coffee. He put 2 sugars in it, just the way I like it. He sat down opposite me and folded his hands on the table. "Dad, we need to talk about your finances," he started, his voice smooth and practiced. "Mackenzie and I stayed up late last night looking over the household bills. It is a mess, Dad. With Mom gone and the funeral expenses, we are worried about you. You are on a fixed income. Inflation is up. We do not want you to struggle." I took a sip of the coffee. It was bitter despite the sugar. "What are you saying, Tyrell?" "I am saying there is help out there," Tyrell said, tapping the manila folder. "There are state programs, subsidies for seniors, monthly stipends for heating and food. You qualify for all of it, Dad. It could be an extra $1,000 a month in your pocket." He opened the folder and spread a fan of papers across the table. They were dense forms covered in fine print and official-looking seals. "I pulled some strings," Tyrell continued. "I got the applications expedited. All we need to do is file them today and the money could start flowing by next week. It would take a huge weight off your shoulders. And ours." He handed me a pen. It was a heavy, expensive ballpoint pen, one I had given him for his college graduation. "Just sign where the little sticky notes are," Dad Tyrell said, smiling encouragingly. "We will handle the rest. We will file it. We will deal with the bureaucrats. You just need to sign." I looked at the papers. My eyes were old, but they were not blind. I reached into my shirt pocket and pulled out my reading glasses. They were taped at the bridge, a battle scar from a transmission repair job 3 years ago. "Let me read them," I said. Tyrell's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "Dad, it is just standard boilerplate. Government jargon. It is boring. You do not need to strain your eyes." "I always read what I sign, son," I said, my voice mild but firm. "Your mother taught me that." I pulled the first sheet toward me. "Application for senior energy assistance." It looked legitimate. I read the second one. "Nutritional support grant." Also legitimate. Tyrell was smart. He was burying the poison in a pile of candy. I flipped through the pages slowly. I could feel Tyrell's leg bouncing under the table. He was nervous. He needed this done fast. I read line by line, pretending to struggle with the words. I remembered the nights I spent studying the manuals for the new hybrid engines when they first came out. I taught myself how to read schematics, how to understand the flow of electricity. Law was not so different. It was just a different kind of machine. And then I found it. It was tucked between a form for water bill reduction and a voter registration update, page 14, General Durable Power of Attorney. The header was printed in a font slightly smaller than the rest. I read the text. It was comprehensive. It granted Tyrell Booker the authority to manage all banking transactions, sell real estate, modify insurance policies, and access safety deposit boxes. It gave him the power to strip me naked and leave me by the side of the road legally. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. This was it. This was the key to the lock he wanted to put on my life. If I signed this, he would not need to kill me. He could just sell the house, empty the bank accounts, and dump me in a state facility with a signature. I looked up. Tyrell was watching me, his eyes predatory. Mackenzie had stopped scrolling. She was watching too, her breath held. "Is everything okay, Dad?" Tyrell asked, his voice tight. I looked back at the paper. I saw the line for the signature. Principal's signature. "This one seems different," I said, pointing to the power of attorney. Tyrell laughed a nervous bark. "Oh, that is just the authorization for us to file the other papers on your behalf. The state needs permission to talk to us about your application. Otherwise, we have to drag you down to the office every time there is a typo. It is just for convenience, Dad. Convenience. The convenience of robbing me blind." I hesitated. If I refused to sign, he would know I was onto him. He would know I was not the confused old man he thought I was. The violence I had heard him beg to avoid on the phone last night might become his only option. I was alone in the house with two people who were desperate enough to erase me. I had to buy time. I had to make him think he had won. But I could not give him my power. I remembered something Mr. O'Malley had told me years ago when we set up the joint account with Etta. He told me that for high-value transactions, especially those involving older clients, the bank verified signatures with extreme prejudice. A missed loop, a different slant, a missing middle initial, anything that deviated from the signature card on file would flag the transaction for fraud review. My signature on file at the bank was precise. Booker T. Washington. I always signed the full name with a flourish on the B and a sharp underline beneath the Washington. It was a signature of pride. I picked up the pen. My hand hovered over the paper. I let it tremble. I let the pen shake like a leaf in the wind. "My arthritis is acting up today," I mumbled. "It is hard to hold the pen." "Here, let me help," Mackenzie said, reaching out. "No," I snapped, pulling the paper back. "I can do it. I am not invalid." I touched the pen to the paper. I focused. I needed this to look real but be legally worthless. I started to write. B-O-O-K-E-R. I wrote it shaky and jagged, and then instead of the T and the full Washington, I just wrote Booker Wash. I let the pen trail off at the end as if my hand had given out. No middle initial, no underline, no flourish. I did this on every single page. On the power of attorney form, I made sure the signature touched the line of the text above it, obscuring the letters just enough to make it contestable in court if it ever came to that. I finished the stack and dropped the pen. I rubbed my hand as if in pain. "There," I said, pushing the pile toward him. "Is that enough?" Tyrell grabbed the papers. He did not even look at the signatures. He just flipped to the back to make sure every line was filled. His eyes lit up with a greed so naked it was hard to look at. "Thanks, Dad," he said, closing the folder and clutching it to his chest like a winning lottery ticket. "You did the right thing. This is going to make everything so much easier." He stood up so fast his chair scraped loudly against the floor. "I am going to go drop these off at the office right now," he said. "The sooner we get this in the system, the sooner you get your money." He looked at Mackenzie. "Pack a bag, babe. We are celebrating tonight. We are going out." Mackenzie smiled for the first time since she arrived. Finally, she said, "I need a drink." Tyrell looked at me. "You will be okay here alone, right, Dad? We will bring you back some dinner, maybe a burger." "A burger, after the soup and the lecture on my health." He was already slipping. He thought he had the keys to the kingdom, so he did not need to pretend to care about the peasant anymore. "I will be fine," I said, staring into my coffee cup. "Just fine." They rushed out of the kitchen. I heard them running up the stairs laughing. They were celebrating my demise. I waited until I heard the front door slam and the car engine start. I waited until the silence of the house settled back around me. Then I stood up. I walked to the window and watched Tyrell's car disappear down the street. He had the papers. He thought he had the power. But he had a signature that wouldn't clear a library book, let alone a bank account. He was going to walk into that bank feeling like a king, and Mr. O'Malley was going to look at that signature and trigger the silent alarm again. But I could not rely just on O'Malley. Tyrell was desperate. When the bank rejected him, he would come back here and he would be furious. I needed to be ready. I walked to the phone on the wall. I picked it up and dialed a number I had memorized from the business card hidden in my shoe. It rang twice. "Law Office of Harrison and Associates," a voice answered. "I need to speak to Mr. Harrison," I said, my voice steady and strong. "Tell him it is Booker. Tell him Etta's boy is trying to burn the house down and I need a bucket of water." The knock on the door came 3 days later, just as the sun was struggling to push through the gray clouds hanging over Atlanta. I was sitting at the kitchen table nursing a cup of lukewarm water because Mackenzie had stopped buying coffee. She said caffeine made me agitated. I heard Tyrell rush to the door, his footsteps heavy and eager. He opened it, and his voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "Come in. Come in," Tyrell said. "He is in the kitchen." A man walked into the room. He was wearing a suit that was a size too small, the fabric shiny in a way that screamed cheap polyester. He carried a battered leather briefcase but no medical bag. He smelled of stale cigarette smoke and strong peppermint gum, the kind used to cover up the smell of cheap bourbon. Dad, Tyrell said, his hand resting on the man's shoulder. "This is Dr. Vance. He is a specialist, a geriatric neurologist. We asked him to make a house call because we are worried about your memory lapses." I looked at Dr. Vance. I recognized him. Not from a hospital or a clinic. I recognized him from the blurry photos my private investigator had sent me the night before. This was not a doctor. This was Marcus Short, a poker buddy of Tyrell S., who had lost his license to practice chiropractics 5 years ago for insurance fraud. He was a gambler who owed money to the same people Tyrell did. Dr. Vance smiled, revealing teeth that had seen too much coffee and not enough floss. "Good morning, Mr. Booker," he said, pulling out a chair and sitting opposite me. "Tyrell tells me you have been having some trouble distinguishing reality from fiction, that you forget where you are." I looked at Tyrell. He was leaning against the counter, watching us with the eyes of a hawk. He needed this. He needed a medical professional to sign a paper saying I was incompetent. The power of attorney. I had signed with the shaky hand was not enough if he wanted to put me away against my will. He needed a diagnosis. "I know exactly where I am," I said, my voice slow and raspy, playing the part. "I am in my house. My wife Etta is just in the other room." Tyrell made a show of wiping a fake tear from his eye. "See, doctor, he still thinks Mom is alive." "It has been days." Dr. Vance nodded gravely and pulled a pen from his pocket. He clicked it nervously. "Mr. Booker, I am going to ask you a few simple questions," he said. "Can you tell me what year it is?" I stared at him. I wanted to tell him it was the year my son decided to sell his soul for a gambling debt. Instead, I squinted and looked at the ceiling. 19, I muttered. 1982. Dr. Vance scribbled furiously on his notepad, disoriented to time. "And who is the President of the United States?" I looked at Tyrell. "He looks like a movie star," I said. "Like that actor. The one from the cowboy movies." "Reagan," Dr. Vance said, shaking his head. "Stuck in the past. Classic dementia progression." He leaned forward and shone a small penlight into my eyes. He did not even look at my pupils. He was looking at my watch, an old gold Timex Etta had given me. "Mr. Booker, do you ever feel like people are stealing from you?" Dr. Vance asked. "Do you feel paranoid?" I looked directly at Tyrell. "Yes," I whispered. "Sometimes I think strangers are in my house, eating my food, sleeping in my bed." Dr. Vance sighed and closed his notebook. "Paranoia, hallucinations, severe cognitive decline." He stood up and turned to Tyrell. "It is worse than you described, Tyrell. This is acute onset dementia. He is a danger to himself. He cannot be left alone. He needs 24-hour supervision in a secure facility." Tyrell let out a breath he had been holding. "So you will sign the papers." "The certificate of incapacity." Dr. Vance nodded. "I will certify it. Stage 4. He needs immediate placement. I can have the paperwork ready by Friday morning." Friday. That was 2 days away. "Thank you," Dr. Tyrell said, shaking his hand vigorously. "You are saving his life." "Really?" They walked to the front door. I heard the murmur of voices and the rustle of an envelope being exchanged. Cash. The price of my sanity was likely a few $1,000s in an envelope. When Tyrell came back into the kitchen, he looked triumphant. "You heard the doctor, Dad," he said, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. "You are sick. Sicker than we thought. But don't worry. We are going to take care of you. We are going to find you a place where you will be safe." He patted my shoulder, his touch making my skin crawl, and left the room whistling. I sat there in the silence, feeling the rage burn in my chest like a coal. They thought I was broken. They thought I was a confused old man living in 1982. But I was not confused. I was counting. I was counting the money they owed me. I was counting the days until their world collapsed. Later that afternoon, Mackenzie came into the living room. She was talking on her cell phone, her voice high and annoying. "Yes, I know it has to be done by the weekend," she was saying. No, we do not care about the view. We care about the price. Cheap is better. He won't know the difference anyway. She saw me sitting in my armchair and abruptly stopped talking. She hung up the phone and smiled that tight plastic smile. Just planning a little getaway, Booker, she lied. Tyrell and I need a break. She sat down on the sofa and opened her oversized purse. She pulled out a compact mirror and checked her makeup. Then she pulled out a glossy brochure and set it on the coffee table. Oh, I almost forgot, she said, tapping the brochure. We found a place for you, Booker. It is lovely. Just like a resort. They have bingo and jello and nice nurses who will tuck you in. She stood up, leaving the brochure on the table. I am going to take a nap, she announced. Don't touch anything. I waited until I heard her bedroom door close. Then I reached for the brochure. Golden Horizon Care Facility. The front cover showed a smiling elderly couple sitting in a sunlit garden. It looked peaceful. It looked clean. But I knew better. Etta and I had looked into care facilities years ago for her aunt. We learned that the glossy photos were always a lie. I pulled my old smartphone from its hiding place inside the cushion of my chair. I had kept it silent and hidden, charging it only when they were asleep. I typed the name of the facility into the search bar. The results made my blood run cold. Golden Horizon was not a resort. It was a warehouse for the forgotten. The first 3 search results were news articles from local investigative journalists. State investigation launched into Golden Horizon after 3 unexplained deaths. Families sue Golden Horizon for neglect and theft of property. Health Department cites Golden Horizon for rat infestation and lack of heat. I read the reviews. Horror stories from children whose parents had rotted away in soiled sheets covered in bed sores while the staff stole their wedding rings. One review said, "My father went in walking and talking. 2 weeks later, he was dead from dehydration, and they claimed it was natural causes. Do not send your dog here." This was where they were sending me. They were not just putting me in a home. They were sending me to a place where I would die quickly and quietly. They did not want to pay for my care. They wanted to pay for my disposal. My hands shook as I took photos of the brochure and the search results, sending them to Mr. Harrison, my lawyer. I added a text message. Friday. They are moving on Friday. I hid the phone back in the cushion just as Tyrell walked into the room. He looked at the brochure on the table and then at me. "Looks nice, right, Dad?" he said. "Expensive too. But you are worth it. We are going to use the money from the house sale to pay for your first year. After that, well, the state kicks in." He picked up the brochure and slipped it into his pocket. "Get some rest, Dad. Big day Friday. We are going to the bank to sort out your accounts, and then we are going to take a little drive to your new home." He walked away, leaving me in the gathering dark. That night the house was quiet, but I could not sleep. The image of the smiling couple on the brochure haunted me. They looked happy because they were actors. The real residents of Golden Horizon were probably crying for water right now. I slipped out of my room and crept down to the basement. I turned on the baby monitor receiver. The green light flickered in the darkness. At first there was only silence, then the sound of clinking glass. Tyrell and Mackenzie were celebrating again. "We did it, babe." Tyrell's voice came through the speaker, slurred with alcohol. "Dr. Vance came through. The certificate is solid." Mackenzie laughed. "Did you see his face when you told him about the resort? He actually believed you." "Stupid old man." I pressed the speaker to my ear. "So what is the timeline?" Tyrell Mackenzie asked. "Friday morning," Tyrell said. "We get him up early. Make him wear his old work clothes. We want him to look disheveled, like he cannot take care of himself. We take him to the bank." "Why the bank?" Mackenzie asked. "I thought we had the power of attorney." "We do," Tyrell said. "But O'Malley, the manager, is a stickler. He called me today, said he needs to see Dad in person to authorize the final liquidation of the retirement accounts because the signature on the forms was shaky. He wants to verify identity." My heart skipped a beat. O'Malley. He had seen the signature. He knew. He was stalling them. "So we take him in." Tyrell continued. He sits there drooling. "I show O'Malley the medical certificate from Vance proving Dad is incompetent. O'Malley has to release the funds to me as the guardian. We drain the accounts, every cent. Then we walk him out the back door and put him in the van, and the facility Mackenzie asked. I already paid the director, Tyrell said. $5,000 cash. He agreed to take him immediately. No waiting list, no questions asked. He gets a private room in the back wing, the one where they put the ones who scream. They sedate them heavily there, babe. He won't even know his own name by the weekend." Mackenzie giggled. "And the house," yours, Tyrell said. We signed the deed over to the buyers on Monday. 500,000. Cash. We pay off the debt and we still have enough left over for a real honeymoon. Maybe Italy. Or France. Italy. They were going to drink wine in Italy while I died of thirst in a room that smelled of urine. I turned off the monitor. My hands were steady now. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. Friday. They had a plan for Friday. They were going to dress me in rags, drag me to the bank, and then throw me away. But they forgot one thing. They were bringing me to Mr. O'Malley. They were bringing me to the one place where I had an ally. I reached for my phone and sent one more text to Mr. Harrison. Friday morning. The bank. Bring the police. And bring the biggest handcuffs you can find. I lay back on the cot and stared at the darkness. Let them celebrate. Let them drink my wine and plan their vacation. Because on Friday they were not going to Italy. They were going to find out that the old mechanic still had one last wrench to throw in their gears, and this one was going to break the whole machine. Thursday night descended on the house like a heavy wool blanket, smothering the last of the daylight. The rain had returned, tapping a relentless rhythm against the windows that sounded too much like impatient fingers drumming on a table. I sat in the living room, confined to a wheelchair that Tyrell had dragged up from the basement earlier that day. I did not need a wheelchair, my legs worked just fine despite the ache in my knees, but Tyrell insisted. He said it completed the image. He said if we were going to the bank in the morning to prove I was incompetent, I needed to look the part. So I sat there wrapped in a moth-eaten shawl, staring at the television that was not even turned on, feeling the humiliation burn under my skin like a fever. Tyrell was pacing the floor, wearing a track in the carpet Etta had vacuumed for decades. He was muttering to himself, checking his phone every 30 seconds. Mackenzie sat on the sofa, biting her fingernails down to the quick. The air in the room was thick with a tension that tasted like copper and ozone. They knew the clock was ticking. They knew Friday was tomorrow. Then the knock came. It was not a polite rap of knuckles against wood. It was a thunderous boom that shook the framed photos on the walls. It sounded as if someone was trying to put a fist through the solid oak door. Tyrell jumped so high he nearly hit the ceiling. His face went the color of old ash. He looked at the door, then he looked at Mackenzie, his eyes wide with a terror that was almost childlike. "Don't answer it," Mackenzie whispered, her voice trembling. "Just pretend we are not here." The pounding came again, louder this time, accompanied by a voice that sounded like gravel grinding in a mixer. "Open the door, Tyrell. We know you are in there. We saw the lights." Tyrell looked at the window. He had forgotten to close the blinds. He was trapped. He looked around the room like a rat looking for a hole. He looked at me sitting silent and still in the wheelchair, and for a second I thought he might ask me to answer it. But then the door handle rattled violently and the wood groaned. "Open it or we kick it in," the voice roared. Tyrell swallowed hard. He smoothed his shirt with shaking hands and walked to the door. He unlocked the deadbolt, the new one he had installed to keep me out, and opened the door just a crack. The door was shoved open with such force that Tyrell stumbled backward, knocking into the hallway table. A vase Etta loved shattered on the floor, but nobody looked at it. Two men stepped into the foyer. They brought the smell of rain and stale tobacco in with them. The first one was enormous, a wall of muscle squeezed into a leather jacket that strained at the seams. His neck was covered in tattoos, dark ink that snaked up from his collar to his jawline. A spider web was tattooed on his left hand. The second man was smaller, wiry, and tense like a coiled spring. He had a scar running through his eyebrow and eyes that looked dead. Tyrell scrambled backward until his back hit the wall. He did not stand his ground. He did not demand they leave. He scurried behind Mackenzie, using his own wife as a human shield. Mackenzie let out a small whimper and shrank into the sofa cushions, but Tyrell kept a grip on her shoulder, peering over her head at the intruders. "Gentlemen." Tyrell squeaked, his voice an octave higher than normal. "I told you. Friday. I told you Friday." The big man stepped into the living room, his muddy boots leaving prints on the carpet. He ignored Mackenzie. He ignored me. He looked only at Tyrell. "Friday is in 4 hours, the big man said. His voice was deceptively calm. "And we heard a rumor, Tyrell. We heard you are planning to leave town. We heard you were looking up flights to Italy." Tyrell shook his head so hard I thought it might detach. No, that is a lie. I am not going anywhere. I am settling my father's estate. That takes time." The wiry man stepped forward. He pulled a knife from his pocket. It was not a switchblade. It was a box cutter, the kind used to slice through cardboard. He slid the blade out with a sharp click. "You owe us $500,000, Tyrell," the wiry man said. "You borrowed it to play the ponies. You said you had a system. You said you could not lose." "I lost," Tyrell whispered, tears streaming down his face. "I know I lost, but I can pay." The big man laughed, a sound devoid of any humor. "You have 48 hours. No, wait. You have until noon tomorrow. If we do not have the cash by noon, we are going to start taking pieces of you. A finger for every 10,000. He looked at the box cutter in his partner's hand. "Or maybe we start with the pretty wife." Mackenzie screamed and tried to pull away, but Tyrell held her tight. He was trembling so violently the whole sofa shook. He looked desperate. He looked around the room, searching for a lifeline, searching for anything that could save his skin, and then his eyes landed on me. I sat there in the wheelchair, my head lolling slightly to the side, playing the part of the confused old man. I watched my son. I watched the gears turn in his panicked mind. I saw the moment he decided that his life was worth more than mine. He pushed Mackenzie aside and pointed a shaking finger at me. "Him," Tyrell shouted. "Look at him." The two thugs turned to look at me. I kept my expression blank, my mouth slightly open. "That is my father," Tyrell said, stepping out from behind his wife. "He is loaded. He has a retirement fund worth millions. He worked for the city for 40 years. He saved everything." The big man looked at me skeptically. "He looks like a bum," he said. "He is frugal," Tyrell insisted. "He is a miser. He has accounts all over the city. But he is sick. Look at him. He does not even know what day it is. I have the papers. I have the power of attorney." Tyrell ran to the kitchen table and grabbed the folder of papers I had signed with the shaky hand. He waved them in the air like a flag of surrender. "See this?" He signed it over to me. "Tomorrow morning, first thing, we are going to the bank. I am going to liquidate his accounts. I will have the cash in hand by 11. I swear." The wiry man walked over to me. He smelled of sweat and cruelty. He leaned down until his face was inches from mine. I could see the pores on his nose. I could see the cold indifference in his eyes. He looked at me like I was a piece of furniture, a broken ATM machine. "Is that right, old man?" the thug asked. "You got the money to pay for your son's mistakes." I wanted to spit in his face. I wanted to stand up and break his nose with the skills I learned in the Navy 40 years ago. But I could not. If I showed strength now, they would just hurt me to get to the money faster. Or they would hurt Tyrell, and as much as I despised what he had become, he was still Eda's son. I let out a low moan and turned my head away, staring at the wall. I mumbled something incoherent about the rain. "He is gone, man," Tyrell said eagerly. "His brain is mush. He is just a signature now. Just let me get him to the bank tomorrow. Please." The big man looked at Tyrell, then at me. He spat on the carpet right next to my shoe. "Fine," he grunted. "Noon tomorrow. We will be outside the bank watching. If you come out without the bag, we come in. And we won't be asking nicely." He turned to the wiry man. "Let's go." They turned and walked out, leaving the front door wide open to the storm. Tyrell rushed to the door and slammed it shut, locking every bolt. He slid down to the floor, his back against the wood, and put his head in his hands, sobbing with relief. Mackenzie was crying on the sofa, rocking back and forth. "You told them about the money," she hissed. "Now they know. If we do not pay them, they will kill us. We are going to pay them," Tyrell said, lifting his head. His eyes were red and wild. He looked at me with a mixture of hatred and salvation. "We are going to the bank tomorrow, Dad," he said to me. "And you are going to be a good boy. You are going to sit there and look sick and let me do the talking. Because if you mess this up, if you say one word that makes them hesitate, those men will come back. And they won't just hurt me. They will hurt you too. They will burn this whole house down with us inside." He stood up and walked over to the sideboard. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, his hand shaking so bad he spilled half of it on the floor. "Get some sleep, old man," he said, taking a long drink. "You have a big performance tomorrow." He grabbed the bottle and gestured for Mackenzie to follow him to the bedroom. "Come on, babe," he said. "It is over. We survived. Tomorrow we get the money and we pay them off, and then we are free." Mackenzie looked at me one last time, her mascara running down her cheeks. She did not look sorry. She looked impatient. She followed Tyrell into the master bedroom and slammed the door. I sat in the living room, listening to the rain and the silence that followed. My heart was beating slow and steady now. The fear had burned away, leaving only cold clarity. Tyrell had sold me. He had offered me up to wolves to save his own hide. He had pointed a weapon at his own father and pulled the trigger. There was no going back from this. There was no misunderstanding. This was the end of the line. I waited 10 minutes, then 20. I heard the murmur of their voices arguing, then the silence of exhaustion. They were drunk on fear and whiskey. They would be asleep soon. I wheeled the chair silently to the bathroom, the only room with a lock they had not changed because it was just a flimsy privacy lock. I went inside and turned on the tap, letting the water run to mask any sound. I reached into my sock and pulled out the burner phone I had bought with the cash from my stash. I had kept it turned off, hidden against my ankle. My fingers felt thick and clumsy as I dialed. It rang once. "Harrison here." The voice was crisp alert even at this hour. "Mr. Harrison," I whispered into the phone. "It is Booker. Booker, are you safe?" Harrison asked immediately. "No," I said. "I am in the house. The Sharks just left. Tyrell owes $500,000 to the mob. He promised them my money tomorrow by noon." I heard the scratch of a pen on paper. Harrison was taking notes. "He is taking me to the bank in the morning," I continued. "He thinks I am incompetent. He thinks he has the power. He is going to try to drain the account." "Okay, Booker. Listen to me," Harrison said, his voice steely. "Do not resist him. Go to the bank." "I know," I said, "but we need to change the plan. Plan A is not enough. This isn't just fraud anymore. It is extortion. It is threats of violence. What do you want to do?" Harrison asked. "Activate Plan B," I said. "Call O'Malley. Tell him to have the conference room ready, but tell him I don't just want security guards. I want the police. I want detectives. Tyrell is going to walk into that bank thinking he is withdrawing a fortune. I want him to withdraw a prison sentence." "I understand," Harrison said. "I will make the call. I will meet you there. Booker, be careful. If these men are watching—" "Let them watch," I said, my voice hardening. "Let them see what happens when you corner a man who has nothing left to lose." I hung up the phone and turned off the water. I hid the phone back in my sock. I looked at myself in the mirror. An old black man in a wheelchair wearing a shawl, looking weak and defeated. Perfect. I wheeled myself back out to the living room and positioned the chair facing the window. I watched the rain fall on the street where the thugs had parked. I knew they were out there somewhere, watching, waiting. Let them come. Tomorrow morning I was going to take my son to the bank, and I was going to make a withdrawal that would cost him everything. The morning sun hit my face not with warmth, but with the harsh glare of a spotlight. I was sitting on the edge of the bed in my underwear, shivering while Tyrell rummaged through my closet. He bypassed my navy blue Sunday suit, the one I had carefully laid out the night before, hoping to wear it with dignity. Instead, he reached into the back corner where I kept my work clothes. He pulled out a pair of grease-stained coveralls and a flannel shirt with a missing button and a frayed collar. It was the shirt I wore to paint the garage 5 years ago. It smelled of turpentine and old sweat. "Put these on," Tyrell ordered, tossing the bundle at my chest. I looked at the rags in my lap. "I wanted to wear my suit, Tyrell," I said, my voice raspy from the dry air. "I want to look respectable if I'm going to the bank." "Respectable is not the look we are going for, Dad," Tyrell sneered. "We are going for confused. We are going for incapable. If you walk in there looking like a deacon, they might ask you questions. If you walk in looking like a hobo, they will talk to me instead." Mackenzie stood in the doorway, checking her reflection in the full-length mirror. She looked like she was going to a fashion show. She wore a cream-colored silk blouse, tailored black trousers, and heels that clicked sharply on the hardwood floor. A gold necklace glittered at her throat. She looked expensive. She looked like money. "Hurry up, Booker," she said, wrinkling her nose. "You smell like the basement. Did you even shower?" "I did not have time," I muttered. "You locked me in the garage." "Whatever, just get dressed," she snapped. "We are on a schedule." I put on the stained shirt. I pulled on the coveralls. I looked in the mirror and I saw a man who looked defeated. My gray hair was uncombed. My face was unshaven because Tyrell had taken my razor. I looked exactly like what they wanted me to be, a husk of a man. Tyrell put on his jacket. It was a Italian-cut midnight blue wool. He adjusted his cufflinks' gold knots that caught the light. He looked at me and then at himself. The contrast was deliberate. He was the capable, successful son stepping in to save his derelict father. It was a visual lie designed to fool the world. "Let's go," Tyrell said, grabbing my arm. And remember, Dad, one wrong word and those men outside will turn this house into a bonfire. He marched me out the front door. The rain had stopped, but the ground was still wet. Parked across the street was a black sedan with tinted windows. I saw the silhouette of two heads inside, the loan sharks. They were watching. Tyrell saw them too. He stiffened and his grip on my arm tightened until it hurt. "Just keep walking," he whispered, his breath hot and anxious against my ear. "Do not look at them." He shoved me into the back seat of his SUV. Mackenzie got in the front passenger seat, pulling down the visor to check her lipstick one last time. Tyrell started the car and peeled out of the driveway. He drove fast, too fast, weaving through the morning traffic. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel. He kept checking the rearview mirror, paranoid that the black sedan was following us. It probably was. We arrived at the bank at 10 minutes past 9. It was a large branch with tall glass windows and polished marble floors. Tyrell parked in the handicap spot right in front. "Okay, listen to me," Tyrell said, turning around to face me. "We are going inside. You are going to sit in the chair. You are going to look at the floor. If anyone asks you anything, you look at me. You understand?" I nodded, keeping my mouth slightly open, feigning the dull stare of the senile. "Good. Let's get this over with." We walked into the bank. The air conditioning hit me cool and sterile. The lobby was busy. People were standing in line waiting for tellers. Businessmen in suits, mothers with children. When we walked in, heads turned. They saw Tyrell and Mackenzie looking like royalty, and then they saw me shuffling behind them in my dirty coveralls. I saw the pity in their eyes. I saw the judgment. They thought I was a charity case. They thought my son was a saint for taking care of me. Tyrell bypassed the line and walked straight to the customer service desk. A young woman named Sarah was sitting there typing on a computer. I knew Sarah. I had fixed her radiator last winter for free because she was a single mother struggling to make ends meet. She looked up and smiled, but the smile froze when she saw me. "Mr. Booker," she said, concern flooding her face. "Are you all right?" Tyrell stepped in front of me, blocking her view. "He is having a bad day," Tyrell said, his voice smooth and authoritative. "I am his son, Tyrell. This is his daughter-in-law, Mackenzie. We need to handle some urgent business regarding his accounts. He is not really up to talking today." Sarah looked around Tyrell at me. I stared at my shoes, biting the inside of my cheek to keep from speaking. "I see," Sarah said slowly. "How can I help you?" "We need to close out his savings and retirement accounts," Tyrell said, placing the thick folder of papers on the desk. "He has decided to move his assets into a managed trust under my care. Here is the power of attorney he signed yesterday along with the medical certificate of incapacity." He pushed the folder toward her. Sarah opened it. She looked at the medical certificate signed by the disgraced chiropractor. She frowned. Then she looked at the power of attorney forms. She scanned the document. Her eyes stopped at the bottom of the page. She looked at the signature. BOOKERWASH. The shaky, incomplete scrawl I had deliberately forged. She looked up at Tyrell, then at the computer screen where my official signature card was undoubtedly displayed. The real signature was sharp, precise, and underlined. The one on the paper looked like a spider had fallen into an inkwell. "I need to verify this," she said, her voice neutral. She started typing. Tyrell tapped his fingers on the desk. Tap, tap, tap. A nervous rhythm. "Is there a problem?" Tyrell asked, his tone sharpening. "We are in a hurry. My father needs to get to his appointment." "Just standard procedure, sir," Sarah said without looking up. "Large withdrawals require manager approval, especially with a third-party authorization." She typed something else and then hit enter. A small, silent notification popped up on her screen. I could not see it, but I knew it was there. Mr. O'Malley had set a flag on my account. The moment anyone tried to access it using that specific faulty signature, the system would lock down. Tyrell looked at his watch. "It is taking too long," he hissed at Mackenzie. "They are stalling." "Relax," Mackenzie whispered, though she looked like she was about to scream. "Just smile. Act normal." Sarah picked up the phone on her desk. "Mr. O'Malley," she said into the receiver. "Yes, I have a Mr. Tyrell Booker here. He is requesting a full liquidation of the Booker T. Washington accounts." "Yes, correct. The power of attorney is inconsistent." Tyrell S. head snapped up. "Inconsistent. What do you mean, inconsistent?" "My father signed that right in front of me." Sarah held up a hand. Yes, sir, I understand. I will send them back. She hung up the phone. She looked at Tyrell, and then for a brief second she looked at me. Her eyes were not pitying anymore. They were alert. She gave me a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. She knew. Mr. O'Malley would like to speak with you personally, Sarah said, standing up. Tyrell slammed his hand on the desk. I do not have time for a chat. I have legal authority. Give me the money. Sir, please lower your voice, Sarah said, stepping back. We cannot process a transaction of this magnitude at the counter. Mr. O'Malley has prepared the necessary paperwork in the VIP conference rooms. He wants to ensure everything is handled with the utmost privacy, given the sensitive nature of your father's condition. VIP conference room. The words hung in the air. Tyrell blinked. His anger wavered, replaced by a flicker of greed. VIP meant money. VIP meant they accepted his status. He looked at Mackenzie. They are taking us to the back, he whispered. That is good, right? That means they are getting the cash ready. It means they respect you, Mackenzie whispered back, smoothing her blouse. They know who is in charge. Tyrell straightened his jacket. He ran a hand through his hair. He looked at Sarah. Fine, he said. Take us to Mr. O'Malley, but make it quick. Sarah gestured toward a heavy oak door at the back of the lobby. Right this way, please. Tyrell grabbed the handles of my wheelchair. Here we go, Dad, he muttered, a triumphant grin spreading across his face. You are finally going to be useful. We are getting the VIP treatment. He pushed me across the marble floor. I felt the vibration of the wheels through the seat. I looked at the other customers as we passed. They were watching us. A man in a suit, a woman in silk, pushing a dirty old man in a wheelchair toward the private offices. It looked like a victory parade for them. But I knew what was behind that oak door. I knew Mr. O'Malley was not sitting there with stacks of cash. I knew he was sitting there with a $12 million piece of paper and a team of people who were very interested in meeting the man who tried to throw it away. Tyrell pushed the door open. The room beyond was dimly lit, plush, and quiet. A long mahogany table stretched down the center. At the far end sat Mr. O'Malley. He was not smiling. Tyrell pushed me into the room and Mackenzie followed, closing the heavy door behind us. The latch clicked shut with a sound that felt final. Mr. O'Malley. Tyrell said, stepping forward, his hand extended. I am Tyrell Booker. This is my wife, Mackenzie. We are here to settle my father's affairs. O'Malley did not stand up. He did not shake Tyrella's hand. He looked at me, his eyes locking onto mine for a brief second before he turned his gaze to my son. Please sit down, Mr. Booker O'Malley said, gesturing to the leather chairs opposite him. We have a lot to discuss, and I believe you are going to want to be seated for what comes next. Tyrell sat down, confident, arrogant, and completely unaware that he had just walked into a cage. I just need the withdrawal slip, Tyrell said, tapping the table. I have the car waiting. O'Malley placed a single item on the table. It was not a withdrawal slip. It was a frame. And inside the frame, behind UV protective glass, was the cream-colored paper with the green border. We will get to the withdrawal in a moment, O'Malley said, his voice cold as ice. But first, I think we should talk about this. Tyrell stared at the frame. His confusion was palpable. He squinted at it. What is that? He asked. Some kind of antique. It is the paper you threw in the trash 3 days ago, O'Malley said. The blood drained from Tyrell's face so fast it looked like a magic trick. He recognized it. He remembered the crunch of the paper in his fist. He remembered the coffee grounds. And in that moment, as my son stared at the fortune he had discarded, I finally allowed myself to smile. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a mechanic who just realized the engine was about to blow and he was the only one standing at a safe distance. The heavy mahogany door clicked shut, sealing us inside the VIP conference room. The air here was different. It smelled of lemon polish and old money. It smelled of power. Tyrell sat across from Mr. O'Malley, vibrating with a mix of greed and terror. He kept checking his watch, glancing at the door as if he expected the loan sharks to burst in at any moment. Mackenzie sat beside him, her posture rigid, her eyes darting around the room, assessing the value of the paintings on the walls. I sat in my wheelchair, my head bowed, my hands resting on my knees. I looked like a man who had given up. But under my lashes, I was watching. I was recording every twitch of my son's eye, every bead of sweat that gathered on his forehead. Mr. O'Malley sat behind his desk, his fingers steepled. He looked at Tyrell with an expression that was almost bored. It was the look of a predator who knows the prey has nowhere to run. "Let us make this quick," Tyrell said, his voice tight. "I have the power of attorney. I have the medical certificate. My father is incapacitated. I need to liquidate the retirement accounts immediately. Cashier S. Check. Today." O'Malley did not reach for a checkbook. He did not reach for a withdrawal slip. Instead, he reached under his desk and pulled out a rectangular object covered in a velvet cloth. He placed it gently in the center of the table. "We will discuss the retirement accounts in a moment," Mr. Booker O'Malley said, his voice calm and deep. "But first we need to address the matter of the primary asset." Tyrell frowned, confusion wrinkling his forehead. "Primary asset? What are you talking about? The old man has a 401k and a savings account. That is it." O'Malley slowly pulled the velvet cloth away. Underneath was a simple black frame, and inside the frame, pressed behind museum-quality glass, was the cream-colored paper with the green border. The paper Tyrell had crumpled, the paper that smelled of coffee grounds and garbage. Tyrell stared at it. For a moment he did not recognize it. It was just a piece of paper. But then his eyes widened. He leaned forward. He saw the coffee stain in the corner. He saw the crease where he had crushed it in his fist. "What is this?" Tyrell asked, a nervous laugh bubbling up in his throat. "Is this a joke? This is the trash I threw out at Mom's house. Why do you have this?" Mackenzie looked at the paper and then at O'Malley. "Why is garbage in a frame?" she asked, her voice shrill. O'Malley leaned back in his chair. He looked at Tyrell with a mixture of pity and disgust. "You called it trash," Mr. Booker O'Malley said. "You threw it in the garbage can because you did not understand what you were holding. You thought it was a relic. You thought it was worthless." Tyrell slammed his hand on the table. "It is worthless. It is an old stock certificate from a company that does not even exist anymore. Stop wasting my time. I need the money." O'Malley smiled. It was a cold smile. A smile that said, "I know everything." "Omnicorp does exist," Mr. Booker O'Malley said softly. "It just changed its name. In 1990, it became one of the largest semiconductor manufacturers in the world, and in 2005, it was acquired by the tech giant that powers half the devices in this room." He tapped the glass of the frame. "This certificate represents 1,000 original preferred bearer shares. It has split 7 times in 40 years. It has reinvested dividends for 4 decades. Tyrell went still. He stopped breathing. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking like a wax figure. "What are you saying?" Tyrell whispered. "I am saying," O'Malley continued, "that this piece of trash you threw away is currently valued at $12,400,000. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum that sucked the air out of the room. I watched my son. I watched his brain try to process the number. 12 million. It was not just enough to pay his debts. It was enough to buy a new life. It was enough to buy 10 lives. 12 million. Mackenzie squeaked. Her voice was so high it sounded like a dog whistle. $12 million. Tyrell looked at the paper. His hands started to shake. He reached out as if to touch the glass, but he pulled back. "No," he stammered. "That is impossible. Mom was a maid. Dad was a mechanic. They did not have $12 million. Your mother had vision," O'Malley said, "and she had patience, something you seem to lack." Suddenly the shock broke and the greed rushed in. It flooded Tyrell's face. It twisted his features into a mask of pure hunger. He looked at the paper like a starving man looks at a feast. $12 million, he repeated, his voice getting stronger. 12 million. "And I have the power of attorney." He looked at O'Malley, a wild grin spreading across his face. "This changes everything. Forget the retirement account. I want to liquidate this. I want to sell the shares. Right now. Transfer the funds to my account. I am the legal guardian." Before O'Malley could answer, there was a movement to my right. Mackenzie threw herself off her chair. She did not stand up. She dropped to her knees on the plush carpet. She crawled the 2 feet between us and wrapped her arms around my legs. She buried her face in my dirty coveralls, ruining her silk blouse with grease and grime. "Daddy," she wailed, her voice thick with fake tears. "Oh, Daddy, I knew it. I knew you were special. I told Tyrell. I said Booker is a genius. I said he has a plan. She looked up at me, her eyes wide and wet with tears that she could summon on command. "We love you so much, Daddy," she sobbed, clutching my knees. "We are going to take such good care of you. We will buy you a mansion. We will get you the best doctors. You won't ever have to live in a basement again. I promise. You are going to live like a king." I looked down at her. This woman who had thrown my wife's teddy bear in the mud. This woman who had fed me soup that made me sick. This woman who had planned to lock me away in a warehouse to die. Now she was hugging my legs like I was her savior. It was the most disgusting thing I had ever seen. I did not move. I did not speak. I just stared at the top of her head, watching the greed radiate off her like heat waves. Tyrell stood up. He walked over and tried to pull Mackenzie off me, but his eyes were on the frame. "Get up, Mackenzie," he snapped. "We do not need to beg. We have the legal authority." He turned to O'Malley. "Did you hear me?" Tyrell demanded, slamming his hand on the table again. "I said liquidate it. I have the power of attorney. I have the medical certificate declaring him incompetent. That makes me the executor of his estate while he is alive. That money is under my control." O'Malley did not blink. He did not flinch. He just shook his head slowly. "I am afraid it is not that simple, Mr. Booker." Tyrell's face turned red. "What do you mean it is not that simple? I have the papers. I signed them." He signed them. O'Malley picked up the folder Tyrell had brought. He opened it and pulled out the power of attorney form. He pointed to the bottom of the page. "First of all," O'Malley said, "this signature is highly irregular. It does not match the signature card we have on file for your father. It is incomplete. It looks forced." "It is because he is sick," Tyrell shouted. "He has dementia." His hands shake. "That brings me to the second point," O'Malley said, calm as a frozen lake. "Bearer shares of this vintage are a unique financial instrument. They are not like a standard bank account. They do not fall under the umbrella of a standard general power of attorney unless they are specifically listed by serial number in the document." He tapped the paper Tyrell had brought. "This document lists bank accounts and real estate. It does not list this specific bond. Therefore, you have no legal authority to touch it." Tyrell looked like he had been punched in the gut. He grabbed the edge of the table, his knuckles white. "So who can touch it?" Tyrell hissed. "He is incompetent. I am his son. Who controls the money?" O'Malley leaned forward, his eyes locking onto Tyrell's. "The original terms of the trust established by your mother, Etta, are very specific. She knew the value of this paper. And she knew you, Tyrell. She knew you better than you thought." Tyrell froze. What did she know? "She knew you might try to take this," O'Malley said. "So she set up a condition, a fail-safe. This certificate can only be liquidated or transferred by one person." Who? Tyrell demanded. "Me. I am her only son." "No," O'Malley said. "Not you." He paused, letting the tension build in the room until it was suffocating. "The assets can only be released to the individual who possesses the heart of Etta according to the instructions in her last will and testament. The newest will. The one she filed 1 week before she died." Tyrell blinked. "The heart of Etta. What is that? Some kind of jewelry? A necklace?" Mackenzie stopped crying. She sat back on her heels, wiping her face. "I saw a ruby necklace," she said, her voice eager. "In her jewelry box. It was shaped like a heart. I pawned it yesterday. She pawned it. I felt a spike of rage, but I pushed it down. That ruby was glass. Costume jewelry. Etta never spent money on rocks." O'Malley shook his head. "It is not jewelry, Mrs. Booker." "Then what is it?" Tyrell screamed, losing control. "What is the heart of Etta?" "It is an object," O'Malley said mysteriously. "An object she cherished above all else. An object she kept near her at all times. And the will states clearly that whoever possesses this object possesses the rights to the $12 million. It was her way of ensuring the money went to someone who actually cared about what mattered to her." Tyrell began to pace the room, running his hands through his hair. He looked like a madman. "We threw everything away," he muttered to himself. "We cleared the house. We threw out the clothes, the books, the knickknacks." He spun around to face O'Malley. "Where is the will?" Tyrell demanded. "I want to see the will. I want to see where it says this. You are lying. You are trying to steal my money." "I am not lying," O'Malley said. "And I do not have the will." Tyrell stopped pacing. You do not have it. Then who does? O'Malley gestured to the side door of the conference room, a door that had been closed the entire time. The executor of the estate has the will, O'Malley said, and he has been waiting for you to ask that question. The side door opened. Tyrell spun around. Mackenzie scrambled to her feet. A man stepped into the room. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit. He carried a leather briefcase that looked like it cost more than Tyrell's car. It was Harrison. My lawyer, the man Tyrell thought was just a myth. Mr. Harrison walked to the table and placed his briefcase next to the framed certificate. He looked at Tyrell with a gaze that could cut glass. Good morning, Tyrell. Harrison said, his voice deep and resonant. I believe you are looking for this. He tapped the briefcase. Inside here is your mother's final will, and inside here are the instructions for finding the heart of Etta. Tyrell looked at Harrison, then at O'Malley, then at me. He was surrounded, but he was too greedy to see the trap. He only saw the briefcase. Give it to me, Tyrell said, stepping toward Harrison. I am the son. That is mine. Harrison did not flinch. You threw the paper in the trash, Tyrell, he said calmly. You threw your mother's legacy in the garbage. Do you really think she left you the key to her fortune in a briefcase you could just grab? He opened the briefcase. He pulled out a remote control. He pointed it at the wall where a large flat-screen television was mounted. Sit down, Tyrell, Harrison commanded. Your mother has a message for you. Tyrell sank into the chair, his eyes fixed on the black screen. Mackenzie stood behind him, clutching his shoulder, her nails digging into his jacket. Harrison pressed the button. The screen flickered to life. And there she was. Etta. My Etta. Sitting in her favorite armchair wearing her Sunday dress. She looked tired, but her eyes were clear and sharp. She looked straight into the camera, straight into the soul of the son who had betrayed her. Hello, Tyrell Etta's voice filled the room, warm and stern at the same time. If you are watching this, it means you tried to sell the house. It means you tried to hurt your father. Tyrell gasped. He looked at the screen as if he were seeing a ghost. I knew you would, Etta continued on the screen. I loved you, son, but I knew you. You always wanted the easy way. You always looked at what we had and called it nothing. She paused and leaned closer to the camera. You want the money, Tyrell. You want the 12 million. Well, I am going to give you a chance. A test. Tyrell leaned forward, captivated. The money goes to the person who holds my heart, Etta said. And my heart is not a diamond. My heart is not gold. My heart is the memory of where we started. She held up her hand. In it she was holding something small and brown. Find this, Tyrell, Etta said. Find this, and you find the fortune. But if you treated my memories like trash, then you have already lost. The screen went black. Tyrell stared at the blank television. He was shaking. What was it, he whispered? What was she holding? I knew. I sat in my wheelchair, silent and still, and I knew exactly what she had held up. It was the key, and I knew exactly where it was. But Tyrell did not know. And as he looked around the room, wild-eyed and desperate, realizing that the $12 million was hidden inside something he had probably already destroyed, the panic truly set in. He turned to me. Dad, he pleaded, falling to his knees beside the wheelchair. Dad, you know what it is. You have to know. Tell me, please. I will give you half. I will give you everything. Just tell me what she was holding. I looked at my son. I looked at the man who had tried to poison me the night before. I looked at the man who called my life worthless. And for the first time in 3 days, I spoke clearly, without the slur, without the confusion. I looked him dead in the eye and said, perfectly calm, I do not know what you are talking about, son. I am just a confused old man. Remember. The air in the VIP conference room was so thick with tension it felt like breathing underwater. Tyrell stood by the mahogany table, his chest heaving, his eyes wild and bloodshot. He looked like a man who had just bet his life on a pair of deuces and was waiting for the dealer to turn the final card. Mr. O'Malley sat like a statue behind his desk, his hands folded over the framed stock certificate. I sat in my wheelchair, silent and invisible, wrapped in my dirty flannel shirt, watching my son disintegrate. This is ridiculous, Tyrell shouted, his voice cracking. You are telling me I cannot access my own inheritance because of a riddle. You are telling me I need a magic object to get what is rightfully mine. He reached into his inner jacket pocket. His hand was shaking so badly he almost dropped the document he was pulling out. It was a crisp white envelope sealed with a red wax stamp that looked like it had been bought at a party supply store. You want legal authority? Tyrell hissed, slamming the envelope onto the table. Here is your legal authority. This is Mom's last will and testament. The real one. Not whatever fairy tale you are spinning. He ripped the envelope open and pulled out a document. The paper was bright white, too white. It looked like it had been printed yesterday. Read it, Tyrell demanded, pushing it toward O'Malley. It is dated 3 weeks ago. It supersedes everything else. It leaves everything to me. Every penny, every property, and it explicitly states that my father is mentally compromised and unfit to manage his own affairs. O'Malley did not even touch the paper. He just looked at it with a weary expression. Mr. Booker, O'Malley said softly, I do not need to read that document to know it is a forgery. How dare you, Tyrell screamed. It is notarized. It is signed. It is signed by Paul Hayes, O'Malley said, cutting him off. The FBI arrested Mr. Hayes last night, Tyrell. They raided his office. They found the template for this will on his hard drive. They have a recording of you paying him $50,000 to print it. Tyrell froze. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking like a corpse. Mackenzie let out a small, strangled gasp and covered her mouth with her hand. That is a lie, Tyrell whispered. You are lying. Mr. Harrison stepped forward then. He moved with the slow, deliberate grace of an executioner. He did not look at the fake will. He walked past Tyrell and stood next to the large, flat-screen television mounted on the wall. Your mother knew you would do this, Tyrell Harrison said, his voice deep and rumbling like thunder. She knew you would try to cheat. She knew you would try to steal. She knew you would try to hurt your father. Harrison reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, silver flash drive. He plugged it into the side of the television. She came to my office 2 weeks before she died. Harrison continued. She was tired. She was in pain, but she was clear. She told me exactly what was going to happen. She predicted every move you have made for the last 3 days. The pressure to sell the house, the medical fraud, the fake will. She saw it all coming. Tyrell shook his head, backing away until his legs hit the edge of the conference table. No, he muttered. Mom loved me. She trusted me. Harrison picked up the remote control. She loved you, Harrison said, but she did not trust you. There is a difference. And she wanted to give you one last chance to prove her wrong. One last chance to show that there was still something decent left inside you. Harrison pressed the play button. The screen flickered to life. The room went silent. Even Mackenzie stopped breathing. On the screen, sitting in her favorite floral armchair in our living room, was Etta. Seeing her face again hit me like a physical blow. It had only been a week since she died, but seeing her alive on that screen, hearing the soft intake of her breath before she spoke, it felt like a miracle and a curse. She looked tired. Her skin was thin like parchment paper and her eyes were surrounded by deep shadows. But her gaze was steady. She was looking directly into the camera lens, directly into the future, directly at Tyrell. Hello, son, Etta said. Her voice was raspy but warm, the voice that had sung lullabies and scolded him for staying out late. If you are watching this, Mr. Harrison has decided it is time for the truth. On the screen, Etta adjusted the shawl around her shoulders. It was the blue knitted shawl I had bought her for Christmas 5 years ago. I know you think I was just a simple woman, Tyrell, Etta continued. I know you think your father and I were just old-fashioned people who did not understand how the world works. I heard you talking to Mackenzie when you thought I was asleep. I heard you call our life small. I heard you call our house a shack. Tyrell flinched. He looked at Mackenzie, who was staring at her shoes, refusing to meet his eyes. I know about the debts, Etta said. I know about the gambling. I know you look at us and you do not see parents. You see a bank account. You see a way out of the hole you dug for yourself. She paused and took a sip of water from a glass on the side table. Her hand trembled slightly. It breaks my heart, son. It breaks my heart to know that I raised a boy who values money more than blood. But I also know that people can lose their way. I know desperation makes people do terrible things. So I wanted to give you a choice. Etta leaned forward. The camera zoomed in slightly, capturing the tears welling in her eyes. I have left everything I own, including the stock certificate your father worked so hard to keep safe, to a trust. But the beneficiary of that trust is not named in the legal papers. The beneficiary is determined by a test. A test, Tyrell whispered, his eyes glued to the screen. I am giving you a chance to inherit everything, Etta said. But not because you are my son. Not because you have my last name. You will inherit it only if you have kept the one thing that mattered to me. She reached down beside her chair. I held my breath. I knew what was coming. I remembered the night she recorded this. I remembered driving her to Harrison S. office, helping her carry the bag. On the screen, Etta lifted a small brown object into the frame. It was Mr. Bear. The teddy bear was old. One of his button eyes was hanging by a thread. His fur was matted and worn bald in patches from 40 years of love. He was missing an ear. He looked like trash. He looked like the most beautiful thing in the world. This bear, Etta said, stroking its head. Your father won this for me on our first date. We had nothing then, Tyrell. We had no money. We had no house. We had no car. We walked 3 miles to that fair because we could not afford the bus. But we had each other. And we had this bear. She looked at the bear and then back at the camera. This bear represents everything we built. It represents the love that started this family. It represents the struggle. It represents the fact that value is not about price tags. It is about meaning. She held the bear out toward the camera. If you want my money, Tyrell, you have to bring this bear to Mr. Harrison. Tyrell's mouth fell open. He stared at the bear on the screen. He blinked rapidly as if trying to clear a hallucination. Inside this bear, Etta said, her voice dropping to a whisper, is the key. Literally. I sewed the key to the safety deposit box inside his stuffing. The box contains the original will naming the beneficiary. If you have the bear, you have the key. If you have the key, you have the fortune. She smiled a sad, knowing smile. But if you threw him away, Tyrell, if you looked at this old raggedy thing and saw only garbage, then you have thrown away your inheritance. You have thrown away your mother's heart. And if you did that, then you deserve nothing. The screen went black. The silence in the conference room was absolute. It was a silence so profound it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Tyrell stood frozen. His eyes were wide and unseeing. He was replaying the last 72 hours in his mind. He was seeing himself walking through the house with a black trash bag. He was seeing himself sweeping the shelves clear. He was seeing himself pick up the old brown bear from the nightstand. I watched the memory play out on his face. I saw the moment he remembered holding the bear. I saw the moment he remembered sneering at it. And then I saw the moment that broke him. He remembered the knife. 3 days ago, while cleaning out the bedroom, Tyrell had found the bear. He had thought maybe there was cash hidden inside it. People hide money in mattresses, why not bears? So he had taken a box cutter, the same kind the loan shark had threatened him with, and he had sliced the bear open. He had ripped out the stuffing handful by handful, throwing the white fluff onto the floor. He had shaken the empty skin looking for a roll of bills or a diamond ring. When nothing fell out but cotton, he had cursed. He had called his mother a stupid old woman, and then he had stuffed the empty skin and the stuffing into a garbage bag. But he had missed it. He had missed the small silver key sewn tight against the inner lining of the fabric. Or maybe he had seen it and thought it was just a weight. He had tied the bag shut. He had carried it out to the back porch. And because the bins were full, he had simply thrown it into the yard, into the mud and the rain. No, Tyrell whispered. The word came out like a strangled sob. No, no, no. He looked at his hands. He looked at them as if they were covered in blood. I cut it, he said, his voice rising to a panic. I cut it open. There was nothing inside. There was just fluff. I threw it away. He spun around to face Mackenzie. We threw it away, he screamed. We threw it in the yard. Mackenzie looked terrified. She remembered too. She remembered watching him do it. She remembered laughing. Maybe it is still there, she stammered. Maybe the garbage men haven't come yet. We can go back. We can find it. Tyrell grabbed her shoulders, shaking her. It rained, he shouted. It rained for 2 days. It is buried in mud. It is gone. He let go of her and turned to Harrison. You have a copy, he pleaded. You have a backup key. You have to. You can open the box. You are the lawyer. Harrison shook his head slowly. I do not have a key, Tyrell. and I do not have the authority to drill the box without a court order or the beneficiary present. The terms of the trust are explicit. Possession of the key proves worthiness. If you do not have the key, you are not worthy. Tyrell fell back into his chair. He looked like a man who had just watched a ship sail away with his life on board. $12 million, he moaned, putting his head in his hands. $12 million in a teddy bear. He looked up at me. His eyes were red and wet. He looked at me with a desperation that was painful to witness. "Dad," he said, his voice breaking. "Dad, you know where it is. You are always digging around in the yard. You save everything. Did you see it? Did you pick it up?" I sat there in my wheelchair, my face a mask of confusion. I looked at him with my mouth slightly open, my head tilted to the side. "Bear," I mumbled. Etta liked bears. Tyrell jumped up. He grabbed the lapels of my dirty coveralls. He shook me. "Think, old man, think," Tyrell shouted, his spit hitting my face. "Did you see the bear? Did you see the brown bear in the trash?" Mr. O'Malley stood up, reaching for the phone. "Security," he barked. Harrison stepped forward, his hand on Tyrell's arm. "Get your hands off him, Tyrell, now!" Tyrell let go of me. He was breathing hard. He looked around the room. He looked at the framed stock certificate on the table. He looked at the black screen of the TV. He looked at the door. He knew. He knew he had lost. He knew the bear was gone. He knew the money was gone. And he knew the loan sharks were waiting outside. But he did not know one thing. He did not know that inside the pocket of my grease-stained coveralls, resting right next to my beating heart, was a small silver key. I had found the bear in the mud. I had brought it to the basement. I had cleaned it. And when I felt the hard lump in the lining, I had cut the thread carefully with my pocket knife. I had found the key. I had it. I had the fortune. I had the legacy. And as my son stood there weeping over his own greed, I decided it was time to drop the act. It was time to stand up. Tyrell looked like a man watching his own execution in slow motion. The silence in the room was broken only by his ragged breathing. He stared at his hands, the same hands that had held the box cutter 3 days ago. I could see the memory playing out behind his eyes like a horror movie he could not turn off. He was remembering the sound of the fabric ripping. He was remembering the white stuffing spilling out onto the bedroom floor like snow. He was remembering the way he had kicked the empty skin of the bear into the corner, calling it garbage, calling his mother's love garbage. "It is gone," Tyrell whispered, his voice cracking. "It is gone. I threw it in the trash. I put it in a black bag. I tied a knot in it. I threw it in the bin outside. And then it rained." He looked up at Mackenzie, his eyes wide and bloodshot. "The garbage truck came yesterday," he said, his voice rising to a shriek. "I heard it. I heard the truck come. It took everything. The bear is in a landfill. The key is in a landfill. The $12 million is buried under tons of trash." He grabbed his hair, pulling at it in frustration. He began to pace the small room like a caged animal. He kicked the leg of the heavy conference table. He punched the wall. "Why did she hide it there?" He screamed at the television screen where Etta's face had been just moments before. "Why did she have to play games? Why could she not just leave me the money? I am her son. I deserve it." He turned to Harrison, his face twisted with rage. "You knew," he accused, pointing a shaking finger at the lawyer. "You knew where it was. You let me throw it away. This is entrapment. I will sue you. I will sue the bank. I will sue everyone in this room." Harrison did not even blink. He just stood there calm and immovable as a mountain. "Your mother gave you a test," Tyrell Harrison said. "You failed. Nobody forced you to cut that bear open. Nobody forced you to throw it away. You did that because that is who you are. You destroy things you do not understand." Tyrell fell to his knees. The arrogance was gone. The slick businessman facade had melted away, leaving only a terrified child who had broken something he could never fix. "Please," he sobbed, burying his face in his hands. "Please tell me there is another way. I owe money. Bad money. If I do not walk out of here with that cash, I am a dead man. They are waiting outside. They are going to kill me." Mackenzie was crying too, but she was looking at Tyrell with pure hatred. "You idiot," she hissed. "You stupid, useless idiot. You threw away $12 million. I told you to check the pockets. I told you to look for jewelry." "There were no pockets," Tyrell wailed. "It was a stuffed animal. I watched them. I watched the greed turn into panic and the panic turn into despair. It was a pathetic sight. These were the people who had planned to lock me away. These were the people who had fed me poison. And now they were on the floor, crying over a teddy bear. I felt a heaviness in my chest. Not pity, but a deep, weary sadness. Etta had been right. She had known exactly what would happen. She had given him a chance to show mercy, to show respect, and he had chosen violence and greed. It was time. I sat up straight in my wheelchair. I rolled my shoulders back, shaking off the slump of the defeated old man. I looked at O'Malley and gave him a small nod. Then I looked at Harrison. He smiled a tiny, almost imperceptible smile. I cleared my throat. The sound was loud in the quiet room. "Tyrell," I said, my voice strong and clear. Tyrell looked up. He blinked through his tears, confused by the change in my tone. "Dad," he sniffled. "Dad, do you remember the bear? Did you see it?" I reached up with my right hand, the hand that was supposed to be weak and arthritic. I unbuttoned the top pocket of my greasy flannel shirt. It was the pocket right over my heart. My fingers brushed against the fabric. I felt the small, hard object resting there, warm from my body heat. "You are right, Tyrell," I said. "You threw it away. You cut it open and you threw it in the mud. You let the rain soak into it. You treated it like it was nothing." I pulled my hand out of my pocket. I held my fist closed tight. "But you forgot something, son," I continued. "You forgot that I am the one who takes out the trash. You forgot that I am the one who walks the yard every night checking the fences. And you forgot that I loved that bear long before you were even born." I opened my hand. Resting in the center of my palm, calloused and stained with engine oil, was a small silver key. It was simple and unadorned, but caught in the teeth of the key was a tiny tuft of white cotton stuffing, a remnant of the bear, a piece of Etta. Tyrell gasped. He scrambled to his feet, his eyes locked on the key. "You have it," he whispered. "You found it." I closed my fingers around the key, protecting it. "I found it in the mud," I said. "I brought it down to the basement. I cleaned the mud off its fur. I dried it with my own towel. And when I felt the hard lump inside the lining, I knew what Etta had done. I knew she had left me a weapon." Tyrell took a step toward me. "Dad, give it to me," he said, his voice trembling with renewed hope. "Give me the key. We can split it. 6 million each. You can have the house. You can have whatever you want. Just give me the key." I looked at him. I looked at the son I had raised, and I saw nothing but a stranger. "I did not keep this for the money, Tyrell," I said quietly. "I kept it because it was hers. I kept it because it was the first thing I ever gave her. I kept it because, unlike you, I know the value of things that cannot be sold." I pushed the brake levers on the wheelchair. Click. Click. Then I stood up. I stood up slowly, unfolding my legs to their full height. I straightened my back. I was not a frail old man. I was 6 feet tall and built from a lifetime of hard labor. I towered over Tyrell. He stepped back, fear flickering in his eyes. "You can walk," he stammered. "You are not sick." "I never was," I said. "I was just watching, and I saw everything." I walked past him. I did not look at Mackenzie, who was staring at me with her mouth open. I walked to the wall behind O'Malley's desk. There was a panel on the wall, a small metal door that looked like part of the decor, but I knew what it was. O'Malley had shown me the schematics years ago when he renovated the branch. I looked at Harrison. He nodded and handed me the folder containing the death certificate and his executor credentials. "Mr. Booker," Harrison said formally, "as the executor of Etta Booker's estate, I certify that you are the holder of the key. You have passed the test." I inserted the small silver key into the lock on the panel. It fit perfectly. I felt the tumblers click into place. It was a sound I knew well, the sound of a machine working exactly as it should. I turned the key. There was a heavy thunk as the internal bolts retracted. The metal door popped open. Inside was a small steel safety deposit box. It was not very big, just large enough to hold a few stacks of papers. Tyrell moved. He lunged toward me, desperation overriding his fear. "Dad, no," he shouted. "Don't open it." The security guard, who had been standing silently by the door, stepped forward, blocking Tyrell's path. He put a heavy hand on Tyrell's chest and pushed him back. Tyrell stumbled and fell into a chair. I ignored him. I reached into the compartment and pulled out the steel box. I placed it on the mahogany table next to the framed stock certificate. The box had a simple latch. I lifted the lid. Inside, resting on top of a stack of legal documents, was a single dried rose. It was the last flower I had given Etta before she went into the hospital. Beneath the rose was a thick document bound in blue paper. The last will and testament of Etta Booker. I picked up the document. It felt heavy in my hands. This was her voice. This was her final judgment. I handed the document to Harrison. "Read it," I said. "Read it so everyone can hear." Harrison put on his reading glasses. He opened the document. The paper crinkled in the silence. "I, Etta Booker, being of sound mind and body, hereby declare this to be my last will and testament." Harrison read, his voice echoing in the room. He looked up at Tyrell over the rim of his glasses. "Regarding the asset known as the Omnicorp Bearer Share Certificate, serial number 894002, Harrison read, "and all accumulated dividends and interest associated with said certificate." Tyrell leaned forward, his face pale, his hands gripping the arms of the chair. "I hereby direct that these assets be placed into an irrevocable trust," Harrison continued. "The beneficiary of this trust is contingent upon the possession of the key contained within the object known as Mr. Bear." Harrison paused. "Since the key has been presented by my husband, Booker Washington." Harrison read, "Looking at me, I hereby name the beneficiaries of the trust." Tyrell held his breath. He was praying. He was hoping that maybe, just maybe, Etta had been soft. Maybe she had included him. Maybe she had left him a crumb. Harrison turned the page. "The entirety of the trust shall be divided as follows," Harrison read. 100% of the asset shall be transferred immediately to the Booker and Etta Washington Foundation." Tyrell blinked. "Foundation? What foundation?" "The mission of this foundation," Harrison read, "is to provide housing, education, and legal support for the underprivileged youth of Atlanta, specifically focusing on trade schools and community centers in the neighborhood where we lived." Tyrell made a noise like a dying animal. "A foundation. She gave it to charity." Harrison continued reading, his voice relentless. "To my son, Tyrell Booker, I leave the sum of $1. $1, Tyrell whispered. "This sum is left to him." Harrison read, "To ensure that he cannot contest this will on the grounds that he was forgotten." He was not forgotten. He was remembered perfectly. Tyrell stood up. He looked at me with a hatred so pure, it was almost blinding. "You did this," he screamed. "You poisoned her against me. You stole my money. That is my money. I earned it. I put up with you people for 35 years. He lunged for the stock certificate on the table. He was going to tear it up. If he could not have it, no one could. But before he could touch it, the door to the conference room burst open. Police, freeze. 3 officers stormed into the room, their weapons drawn. They were not the regular beat cops. These were detectives in plain clothes. Tyrell froze his hand inches from the frame. Tyrell Booker, a detective, shouted, "Step away from the table! Put your hands in the air!" Tyrell looked at the cops. He looked at the loan sharks who he knew were waiting outside. He looked at the $12 million sitting on the table. He realized then that there was no way out. The walls had closed in. He slowly raised his hands. He looked at me one last time. "Dad," he whimpered, "help me. Please. They are going to kill me." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had thrown away his mother as Hart. "I am sorry, son," I said, "but I can't help you. I am just a confused old man, and I have a foundation to run." The silence in the conference room was heavy and suffocating, like the air before a tornado touches down. The police detectives who had burst in stood by the door, their hands resting near their holsters, waiting for the signal, but Mr. Harrison was not finished. He held the blue-bound document with a reverence that made my throat tight. He looked at Tyrell, who was trembling like a leaf in a storm, and then he looked at me. I nodded. It was time to finish this. It was time to read the fine print of my son's destruction. Harrison adjusted his glasses and turned the page of the will. The sound of the crisp paper turning echoed off the mahogany walls. The assets previously mentioned, Harrison read, his voice steady and calm, including the $12 million valuation of the bearer shares and the deed to the property at 42 Oak Street shall be liquidated and transferred into the Booker and Etta Washington Community Trust. Tyrell let out a whimper. It was a small, pathetic sound. He was gripping the edge of the table so hard his fingernails were turning white. He was watching the money, the freedom, the Italy trip, the new life, all of it dissolving into smoke. "The trust shall have 2 primary beneficiaries," Harrison continued. 50% of the assets will be donated to the Westside Community Center for the establishment of a vocational training program for young mechanics and tradesmen. I closed my eyes and smiled. Etta knew. She knew how much I loved teaching the neighborhood kids how to fix a carburetor. She knew I wanted to leave something behind that lasted longer than a bank balance. She was giving me a legacy. Tyrell's head snapped up. A trade school, he hissed. You are giving $6 million to a school for grease monkeys. You are giving my inheritance to people who fix toilets and change oil. Harrison ignored him. He continued reading. The remaining 50% shall be donated to the St. Jude Charity Nursing Home specifically for the renovation of their memory care wing and to subsidize care for elderly patients with no living family. Mackenzie gasped. That was the place. That was the warehouse where they had planned to dump me. The place with the rats and the bed sores. Etta was taking their money and using it to fix the very hell they had tried to sentence me to. It was poetic. It was perfect. You are kidding me, Mackenzie shrieked. You are giving millions to a nursing home. You are throwing it away on old people who do not even know their own names. We are young. We have lives to live. We have debts. Harrison looked at her over the rim of his glasses. His gaze was cold enough to freeze water. Your debts. Mrs. Booker are not Etta's concern. Her concern was ensuring that no one else would ever suffer the fate you planned for her husband. He looked back at the document. The trust will be administered by Mr. Booker Washington, who shall receive a stipend for his time and effort, ensuring he lives in comfort and dignity for the remainder of his days. Tyrell looked at me. His eyes were wide and wet with tears of rage. You, he whispered. You get control. You get the stipend. You get everything. I looked at him. I did not feel triumph. I felt a deep, aching sadness. I get my life back, son, I said quietly. I get to live without fear. I get to sleep in my own house without worrying if you are going to poison my juice or push me down the stairs. That is all I ever wanted. Tyrell's face twisted. The handsome mask he wore for the world melted away, revealing the ugly, desperate thing underneath. You stole this from me, he screamed, spitting the words out. You manipulated her. You made her write this. Harrison cleared his throat. The sound was sharp like a gavel striking a block. There is one final clause, Harrison said. And I suggest you listen very carefully, Tyrell, because this part was written specifically for you. Etta was very clear about this. She wanted to make sure there was no ambiguity. She wanted to make sure you understood exactly where you stand. Tyrell froze. He looked at the lawyer with a mixture of hope and terror. Maybe there was something left. Maybe there was a crumb. Harrison read from the final page. To my son, Tyrell Booker, who I loved with all my heart, but who lost his way, I leave a specific bequest. Tyrell leaned forward. I could see the greed reigniting in his eyes. A bequest. That sounded promising. Maybe it was the house. Maybe it was a smaller account. In recognition of his relationship to me, Harrison read, and to ensure that he cannot contest this will in any court of law by claiming he was accidentally omitted or forgotten, I hereby leave him the sum of $1. The room went dead silent. $1, Tyrell whispered. $1, Harrison repeated firmly. $1. It is a legal strategy, Tyrell. If she left you nothing, you could sue. You could say it was a mistake. You could tie up the estate and probate for years. But by leaving you a specific amount, she proved that she thought about you. She considered you. And she decided that $1 was exactly what you were worth. Harrison reached into his pocket. He pulled out a single crisp dollar bill. He placed it on the table and slid it across the mahogany surface. Here is your inheritance, son. Do not spend it all in one place. Tyrell stared at the dollar bill. It sat there green and mocking in the center of the table. It was the only thing he was going to get. The millions were gone. The house was gone. The future was gone. Something inside Tyrell snapped. I heard it. It was like the sound of a cable parting under too much tension. His face turned a dark purple. His veins bulged in his neck. He let out a roar that did not sound human. No, he screamed. No, he lunged. He did not go for the money. He did not go for the lawyer. He came for me. He threw himself across the conference table, scattering papers and knocking the framed certificate to the floor. His hands were claws reaching for my throat. You old devil, he shrieked. You ruined everything. Die. Just die. He was fast. Desperation made him fast. He cleared the table and landed on me, knocking the wheelchair backward. We crashed to the floor. His hands were on my neck, squeezing tight. I saw his face, inches from mine, twisted into a mask of pure hate. He was going to kill me right there on the floor of the bank. But he never got the chance to finish the job. Before I could even struggle, the room exploded into motion. Police, get off him! The security guard by the door, the one who had looked bored and sleepy, suddenly moved with the speed of a striking cobra. He was on Tyrell in a second, grabbing him by the back of his expensive Italian jacket and yanking him backward. At the same time, the door to the break room burst open and two more men in plain clothes rushed in. They were not bank employees. They were the undercover officers Harrison had requested. They tackled Tyrell, dragging him off me and pinning him to the thick carpet. "Get off me!" Tyrell screamed, kicking and thrashing. "That is my money! He stole my money!" One of the officers pressed a knee into Tyrell's back, forcing the air out of his lungs. "Tyrell Booker, you are under arrest," the officer shouted over Tyrell's screams. "For what?" Tyrell gasped, struggling against the weight. "For wanting my inheritance. That is not a crime." Mr. O'Malley stepped forward. He helped me sit up. I rubbed my neck where Tyrell's fingers had dug in. I was okay. Shaken, but okay. "It is not a crime to want an inheritance," O'Malley said, looking down at Tyrell. "But it is a crime to forge a signature on a federal banking document. It is a crime to attempt grand larceny. And it is definitely a crime to conspire to commit murder." Tyrell stopped struggling. He looked up at O'Malley from the floor, his cheek pressed against the carpet. "Murder," he whispered. "I never." "We have the recording," Tyrell O'Malley said. "We have the audio from the baby monitor your father planted in the living room. We heard you talking to your wife. We heard you planning to send him to that facility to die. We heard you discussing the pills, and we have the footage of you spiking his drink last night." Tyrell went limp. He looked at Mackenzie, who was standing in the corner, pressed against the wall, her hands over her mouth. "She helped me," Tyrell shouted, pointing a shaking finger at her. "It was her idea. She told me to do it. She said he was useless." Mackenzie's eyes went wide. "You liar," she screamed. "You are the one who owed the money. You are the one who got us into this mess. I just wanted to go to Italy." The officers pulled Tyrell to his feet. They spun him around, and I heard the metallic click of handcuffs. It was a sound I had prayed for and dreaded at the same time. My son was going to prison. "Officer, please take Mrs. Booker into custody as well," Harrison said, pointing at Mackenzie. "She is an accessory to fraud and attempted murder. We have her voice on the tapes, too." Mackenzie started to run toward the door, but the security guard blocked her path. He took her arm gently but firmly. "Ma'am, please place your hands behind your back." "No," Mackenzie wailed. "I am innocent. I am a victim here. He forced me." "Nobody forced you to throw my wife's bear in the mud," I said, my voice cutting through her hysterics. "Nobody forced you to feed me poison soup. You did that because you wanted to." The officers marched them out of the conference room. I watched them go. Tyrell was sobbing now, begging for a deal, begging for his lawyer, begging for his daddy to help him. "Dad, tell them," Tyrell shouted as they dragged him through the lobby. "Tell them I am your son. You can't let them take me." I stood there in my dirty coveralls, my hand clutching the silver key in my pocket. I looked at the man who had been my pride and joy, who I had carried on my shoulders, who I had taught to be a man. I did tell them. I whispered to the empty room. I told them everything. Mr. O'Malley picked up the framed certificate from the floor. The glass was cracked, but the paper inside was unharmed. He handed it to me. "It is safe now," Mr. Booker O'Malley said. "And so are you." I took the frame. I looked at the cream-colored paper. It was just paper. But it had revealed the truth of my life. It had shown me who my family really was. "Thank you, Mr. O'Malley," I said. Harrison put a hand on my shoulder. "Are you okay, Booker?" he asked. I looked at the door where my son had vanished. "I will be," I said. "I have a lot of work to do. The house needs fixing, and I have a foundation to build." Etta would not want me sitting around feeling sorry for myself. We walked out of the bank. The sun was shining now, bright and clear. The rain had washed the streets clean. The black sedan that had been parked across the street was gone. The loan sharks had seen the police cars and scattered like roaches in the light. They would not bother me. They knew the money was gone, and they knew Tyrell was beyond their reach, now locked in a cage of his own making. I got into my old truck. It smelled of oil and hard work. I started the engine. It roared to life, ready for the next job. I was alone. But I was not lonely. I had Etta in my heart. I had a purpose. And I had $1 left on the table back in that conference room, a reminder of the price of greed. I drove home. I had a mess to clean up. And for the first time in a long time, I was looking forward to the work. The handcuffs clicked shut around Tyrell's wrists with a sound that was final and cold. It was the sound of a steel door slamming on a life that had once been full of promise. My son was on his knees on the plush carpet of the bank conference room, his expensive suit rumpled and his face pressed against the floor. He was breathing hard, sucking in air like a man who had just surfaced from drowning, but the water was still rising. "Officer, please wait," Mr. Harrison said, his voice cutting through the chaotic noise of the arrest. "Before you take him away, there is more evidence you need to secure. Evidence that proves this was not just a financial crime. This was a calculated attempt to end a life." The detective signaled for his men to pause. They hauled Tyrell up to his knees. He looked wild. He looked at Harrison with eyes full of panic. "What evidence?" Tyrell spat. "You have nothing. I just wanted my inheritance. That is civil court, not criminal." Harrison walked to the table. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a small plastic evidence bag. Inside was the linen napkin I had spat the orange juice into the night before. The orange stain had dried to a crusty brown. "This napkin contains traces of diazepam and oxycodone," Harrison said, holding it up for the detective to see. "A lethal cocktail for a man of Mr. Booker's age and heart condition. We have already sent a sample from the kitchen counter to the lab, but this napkin proves intent." He crushed the pills, he mixed the drink, and he watched his father swallow it. Tyrell struggled against the officer holding him. "He is lying," Tyrell shouted. He choked. "I was trying to help him." Harrison did not argue. He simply reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen and connected it to the Bluetooth speaker in the conference room. "We also have audio confirmation," Harrison said. "Recorded last night in the home of the victim." He pressed play. My own voice came through the speakers first, the sound of my fake coughing fit. Then the silence. And then Tyrella's voice clear as a bell. "He drank half of it. That should be enough. That should be..." It was Valium. 50 milligrams. "It hits fast." Then Mackenzie's voice. "What do we do with him now?" And finally Tyrell again, the words that sealed his fate. "Let him choke. As long as he signs the withdrawal slip tomorrow, I do not care if he stops breathing 5 minutes later." The recording ended. The silence in the room was absolute. The detective looked at Tyrell with a look of pure disgust. "That is conspiracy to commit capital murder," the detective said. "You were not just robbing him, son. You were liquidating him." Tyrell's face crumbled. The arrogance, the anger, the entitlement had all washed away, leaving only a terrified child who knew the monster under the bed had finally caught him. "I did not mean it," he sobbed. "I was stressed. I just wanted him to sleep. I did not want him to die." "You did not care if he died," Harrison corrected. "And that is the same thing in the eyes of the law." Harrison then pointed to the stack of papers on the table, the ones Tyrell had tried to use to claim authority over my accounts. "And then there is the matter of the forgery," Harrison added. "The signature on the power of attorney document, BOOKERWASH. It is a deliberate mismatch, but the intent to deceive a federal financial institution is clear. That is bank fraud, wire fraud, and elder abuse. You are looking at 20 years minimum, Tyrell. Even if they do not get you for the attempted murder, the paper trail alone will bury you." Tyrell slumped. The fight went out of him. He hung his head, his shoulders shaking. "Why, Dad?" he whispered. "Why did you have to record me? Why did you have to trap me?" I looked at him from my wheelchair. I did not feel victory. I felt a hollow ache in my chest where my heart used to be. "Because you stopped being my son the moment you decided my life was the price of your comfort," I said. "I recorded you because I wanted to believe I was wrong. I wanted to hear you say you loved me. I wanted to hear you say we cannot do this. But you never said it. You just counted the money." The detective grabbed Tyrell by the arm and hauled him to his feet. "Let's go," he said roughly. "You have a lot of questions to answer downtown." "Wait." The scream came from the corner of the room. It was Mackenzie. She was standing there, her hands cuffed behind her back, her face streaked with mascara. Tears. She looked from Tyrell to the detective, her eyes wide with a dawning realization. She was going down. She was going to prison, and she was going there for a man who had failed. "I want to make a deal," Mackenzie shouted, her voice shrill and desperate. "I want to talk. I can tell you everything." Tyrell spun around to look at her. "Mackenzie, shut up," he hissed. "Do not say a word." "Shut up," Mackenzie screamed back at him. "You shut up. You dragged me into this. You said it was foolproof. You said he was senile. You said we would be in Italy by Monday." She turned to the detective, pleading. "It was all him, officer. I swear. I did not want to do it. He forced me. He owes money. Bad money." Tyrell's eyes went wide. "Mackenzie, no. He owes $500,000 to a loan shark named Vinnie McKenzie, babbled the words spilling out of her like water from a broken dam. He gambled it away. Online poker, sports betting. He lost everything. Our savings, my jewelry. He even stole from his company accounts. That is why he lost his job 6 months ago. He did not quit. He was fired for embezzlement. Tyrell struggled against the cops. You traitor, he screamed. You spent that money too. You bought the clothes. You booked the trips. Mackenzie ignored him. He told me we had no choice. She continued crying harder now. He said Vinnie was going to kill us. He said the only way out was his father's house. He said the old man was useless anyway. He said he was just taking up space. He planned the whole thing. The doctor, the forgery, the poison. It was his idea. I just went along with it because I was scared. She looked at me, her eyes begging for mercy. Booker, please tell them. Tell them I was always nice to you. I cooked for you. I cleaned the house. I am a victim here too. I looked at her. I remembered the soup. I remembered the teddy bear in the mud. I remembered her laughing when Tyrell talked about putting me in the memory care wing. You are not a victim, Mackenzie, I said softly. You are the getaway driver, and the driver goes to jail just like the gunman. The detective nodded to his partner. Get her out of here. She can give her statement at the precinct. They pushed Tyrell and Mackenzie toward the door. They were shouting at each other now, blaming, accusing, screaming insults that echoed off the high ceilings of the bank lobby. It was the ugly end of a beautiful lie. I watched them go, my son and the woman he married dragged away like common criminals in front of the tellers and the customers. The lobby was silent as they passed. People stared. Some shook their heads. They saw a tragedy. I saw a necessary surgery. I was cutting out the rot to save the body, but the surgery was not over yet. As the officers pushed Tyrell through the glass doors and onto the sidewalk, the bright sun hit him. He blinked, squinting against the light. And then he saw them. Across the street, standing by a newsstand, were two men. The big man with the neck tattoos and the wiry man with the scar. The loan sharks. They had not left. They had been waiting. They saw Tyrell in handcuffs. They saw the police cars. They saw Mackenzie weeping. They knew instantly what had happened. There would be no money. There would be no payday at noon. Tyrell saw them too. He stopped dead in his tracks, causing the officer behind him to stumble. He stared at the big man. His lips moved, forming a silent plea. Help me. The big man did not move. He did not look angry. He looked disappointed. He pulled a cell phone from his pocket. He typed a short message. He hit send. He looked at Tyrell one last time, and then he turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. The wiry man followed him without a backward glance. A second later, a buzzing sound came from the evidence bag the officer was holding. It was Tyrell's phone. The officer looked at the phone. He frowned. Then he looked at Tyrell. You got a text, the officer said, from someone named Vinnie. Tyrell went pale. Read it, he whispered. Please read it. The officer read the screen. It says deal is off. You are useless inside. We are taking the collateral. Enjoy the cage. Tyrell screamed. It was a sound of pure despair. Collateral. He knew what that meant. My car, he shrieked. My condo. My storage unit. They are going to take everything. He tried to run back toward the bank, back toward me, but the officers held him tight. Dad, stop them, he yelled. Dad, they are going to strip me clean. They are going to take my life. You have the money. Pay them. Please pay them. I stood in the doorway of the bank, flanked by O'Malley and Harrison. I watched my son realizing the full extent of his punishment. Prison was just the beginning. While he sat in a cell, the sharks would pick his bones clean on the outside. He would come out in 20 years with nothing. No home, no car, no money, no wife, no father. I did not move. I did not offer to pay. I had paid enough. I had paid with 40 years of sweat. I had paid with my wife's broken heart. I watched as they shoved him into the back of the squad car. I watched as they pushed Mackenzie into a separate vehicle. I watched the blue lights flash and the sirens wail. And then they were gone. The street was empty. The loan sharks were gone. My son was gone. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of exhaust and city grit, but underneath that, it smelled of freedom. Mr. Harrison stepped up beside me. It is done, Booker, he said. Done. Booker, it is finally done. I nodded. Yes, it is done. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small silver key. I held it tight. Now comes the hard part, I said. Now I have to rebuild. O'Malley walked up to us. He was holding the framed certificate. Mr. Booker, he said, I can put this back in the vault for you, or we can start the process of transferring the funds to the foundation account immediately. Transfer it, I said. Every cent. I do not want that paper in my house. It has caused enough trouble. O'Malley nodded. Consider it done. And Mr. Booker. Yes. You are a hell of a poker player. I smiled tiredly. I learned from the best, I said, thinking of Etta. She always knew when to hold them and when to fold them. I walked to my truck. My knees hurt. My back hurt. I was an old man alone in the world. But as I climbed into the cab and turned the key, I felt a lightness I had not felt in years. I drove home. The house was quiet. The trash was still in the yard. The soup bowl was still on the table. I walked into the living room. I picked up the baby monitor and threw it in the trash. I walked into the kitchen and threw out the soup. I walked into the bedroom and stripped the sheets off the bed. Then I went to the basement. I retrieved Mr. Bear from his hiding place. I sat on the back porch with a needle and thread and I sewed him back up. It was not a perfect job. The stitches were crooked and his stuffing was a little lumpy, but he was whole again. I set him on the porch railing. We watched the sunset together. We did it, Etta, I whispered to the empty air. We cleaned house. I knew there would be hard days ahead. I knew I would miss the son I thought I had. But I also knew that I had done the right thing. I had protected our legacy. I had protected our dignity. And as the first star appeared in the evening sky, I knew that somewhere Etta was watching, and she was smiling. 6 months had passed since the sirens faded from the front of the bank, and the silence that followed was not empty. It was full of peace. The smell of mildew and fear that had plagued my house was gone, replaced by the scent of fresh sawdust and brewing coffee. I stood on my back porch looking out over the yard. The mud where Mackenzie had thrown my memories was gone, covered now by lush green grass and flower beds that bloomed with the same yellow roses Etta had loved so much. I was not wearing grease-stained coveralls today. I was wearing a clean-pressed shirt and a pair of trousers that fit me properly. I had gained weight, the good kind that comes from eating meals cooked with love, not obligation. My hands were still rough, but they were steady. I walked back into the house. It was no longer a tomb. It was a hive of activity. The living room where I had sat in that wheelchair pretending to be senile was now filled with folding tables and chairs. A dozen kids from the neighborhood sat there, heads bent over books and tablets. They were the first class of the Booker and Etta Washington Scholars Program. They were loud and messy and brilliant. Mr. Booker, a young boy named Marcus, called out. He was 12 years old with eyes that had seen too much trouble, but hands that were gentle when he held a wrench. Mr. Booker, I think I fixed the carburetor on that lawnmower. Can you check it? I walked over to him. I put a hand on his shoulder. It felt good to be needed, not as a victim, but as a teacher. Let us take a look, son, I said. We walked down to the basement. It was no longer a dungeon with a cot in the corner. I had gutted it. I had installed bright lights, workbenches, and tool chests filled with the best equipment money could buy. It was a workshop now, a place where young men and women could learn a trade where they could learn that their hands had value. I watched Marcus pull the cord on the mower. The engine sputtered and then roared to life, a healthy mechanical hum that sounded like music. "Good job, Marcus," I shouted over the noise. "You have the touch." He beamed at me. It was a smile of pure pride. It was the kind of smile I used to see on Tyrell's face before the world got to him, before he decided that easy money was better than hard work. I felt a pang of old grief, but I pushed it away. I had new sons now. I had new daughters. I had a whole community that called me Pops and meant it with respect. I went back upstairs. Mr. Harrison was standing in the kitchen. He visited every Wednesday, not just as my lawyer, but as my friend. He was leaning against the counter drinking coffee from one of Etta's mugs. He looked older but happier. The success of the foundation had given him a new purpose too. "Good morning," Booker Harrison said. "The place looks great. I see the painters finished the trim." "They did a good job," I said, pouring myself a cup. Etta would have liked the color. "It is called Morning Sun." Harrison's smile faded slightly. He reached into his briefcase. The leather was worn now, less intimidating than it had been in the bank conference room. "I have something for you, Booker," he said. "It came to the office yesterday. It was forwarded from the state penitentiary." The room went quiet. The laughter of the kids in the living room seemed to fade into the background. I put my cup down. I knew what it was. I had been expecting it. Harrison handed me a white envelope. It was cheap paper stamped with the red ink of the Department of Corrections. The handwriting on the front was familiar but shaky, stripped of its arrogance. "Do you want me to file it?" Harrison asked. "You do not have to read it." "No," I said, taking the envelope. "I need to read it." I walked over to the kitchen table, the same table where Tyrell had tried to force me to sign away my life. I sat down in my chair. I used my pocket knife to slit the envelope open. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper. The writing was cramped, as if the author was trying to make himself small. "Dear Dad." The letter began. I stared at those words. Dad. He had not called me that in years, not really. He had called me old man. He had called me a burden. He had called me a ghost. "I hope you are doing well." The letter continued. "I am not. This place is hell, Dad. You have no idea. The food is garbage. The bed is hard. I am scared all the time. Mackenzie filed for divorce. She is testifying against me to get a reduced sentence. She says it was all my idea. Can you believe that, after everything I gave her?" I read on. There was no apology in the first paragraph, no remorse, just complaints, just the same old Tyrell blaming the world for the hole he had dug. "Dad, I am writing because I need help." The letter went on. "My public defender is an idiot. He says I should take a plea deal for 20 years. 20 years, Dad. I will be an old man when I get out. I need a real lawyer. I need Harrison. I know you have the money now. I know about the foundation. I saw it on the news. You are giving millions to strangers." My hand tightened on the paper. Strangers. He called the children of his own neighborhood strangers. "Please, Dad. Just a little bit. Just enough to hire a decent defense team. I am your son. Blood is thicker than water, right? I made a mistake. I know that. But do I deserve to die in here? I promise if you help me get out, I will pay you back. I will work for the foundation. I will do anything. Please do not leave me here. Love, Tyrell." I put the paper down. I smoothed it out on the table, just like I had smoothed out the bearer bond certificate 6 months ago. I looked at the signature. It was scrawled and desperate. I thought about the man who wrote this. I thought about the man who crushed pills into my orange juice. I thought about the man who looked me in the eye and told me to die quietly so he could go to Italy. He did not want forgiveness. He did not want redemption. He wanted money. He was still trying to pick the lock of my heart, not because he wanted to come inside and be warm, but because he wanted to steal the furniture. Harrison was watching me. "What does he say?" Harrison asked softly. "He says he is suffering," I said. "He says he wants money for a lawyer. He says he will pay me back." Harrison snorted. "He never changes, does he?" "No," I said. "He does not." I looked around my kitchen. It was clean. It was bright. The white blinds Mackenzie had installed were gone, replaced by yellow curtains I had sewn myself. The air smelled of life. I thought about the $1 bill Harrison had slid across the conference table. Tyrell had left it there when the police dragged him away. I had framed it. It hung in the hallway, a reminder of the price of betrayal. I picked up the letter. I felt the texture of the cheap paper. "He threw away $12 million, I said to the empty room. "He threw away his mother's love. He threw away his father's protection, and now he wants me to buy it back for him." I stood up. I walked to the trash can in the corner of the kitchen. It was a new can, stainless steel and sturdy. I looked at the letter one last time. I did not feel anger anymore. I did not feel hate. I felt a profound sense of closure. The cord had been cut. The wound had cauterized. I crumpled the letter in my fist. I squeezed it tight until it was just a ball of trash. It made a dry, crinkling sound, the same sound the stock certificate had made when Tyrell crushed it. I held it over the bin. "Trash belongs in the trash," I said. I dropped the ball of paper. It fell into the bin, landing on top of some potato peelings and coffee grounds. I closed the lid. It made a solid, satisfying thud. Harrison watched me. He nodded once, a gesture of respect. "What do you want me to tell him?" Harrison asked. "Tell him nothing," I said. "He got his inheritance. He got his dollar. The rest belongs to the future." I walked to the back door and opened it. The sunlight flooded in warm and golden. I could hear the kids laughing in the basement, working on the engines, building things, fixing things. I stepped out onto the porch. Mr. Bear was sitting on the railing where I had left him, his button eye gleaming in the sun. I patted his head. "We are okay, old friend," I whispered. I looked out at the garden. The weeds were gone. The rot was gone. The house was standing strong on its foundation. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the sweet air of a day that belonged entirely to me. "The trash has been cleared out," I said, my voice strong and sure. "Now it is time to live my life." I walked down the steps and into the yard, ready to teach Marcus how to tune an engine, ready to build a legacy that would last long after I was gone. I was Booker Washington. I was a mechanic. I was a father to those who deserved it. And I was finally free. My son spent his whole life chasing the shine of gold, but he missed the true value of the iron that built it. He looked at an old teddy bear and saw trash. I saw a legacy. He looked at his father and saw a burden. I saw a survivor. The hardest lesson I ever learned wasn't how to fix an engine, but how to fix a broken heart. I learned that family isn't defined by the blood in your veins, but by the loyalty in your actions. You can't buy respect, and you certainly can't steal dignity. Sometimes you have to let go of the people who weigh you down to finally rise. If you believe that integrity is worth more than any inheritance, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of justice. And tell me in the comments, would you have given Tyrell a second chance, or did he get exactly what he deserved?